If thee summon me, I shall come. Welcome, chat. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Maybe too much light? What do y'all think? Yeah, that's better. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for entertainment or educational purposes only. Let's race through announcements because I am late in terms of getting stuff to work. So a couple things. So our Right in the Fields event is going on right now. We've had 17,000 people, logs. I'm not quite sure. I think 17,000 cases of people logging their emotions. So that's super cool. Empathy Labs is now live, which is our chance to look at what other people are like. We look at text from other people's posts, all anonymized. And it gives us a chance to sort of guess what people could be feeling, which is pretty neat, right? So you can sort of practice your empathy leveling up skills. And we've got a couple of other things that are kind of cool. So starting on Wednesday, we're going to start tracking intensity of emotion. So thus far, we've just been focusing on quality, but not like quantitative tracking of emotions. So that'll go live on Wednesday if y'all are interested in that. And so if y'all are interested in building your emotional awareness and kind of like better understanding yourselves, by all means, participate in the event. And today we're going to do a call-in stream around fear. So let's actually jump right in. Let me see. Let's go. All righty. Ready to get started?
Yep.
Let's do it. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, can you count to 10 for me?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so welcome. And today I think the topic is what are you afraid of, right? Or what scares you?
Yes.
Since it's Halloween, we're going to be focusing on fear. And what do you go by, my friend?
Eleanor.
Eleanor. Okay, nice to meet you,
Yes.
Eleanor. So what are
Nice to
you
meet you.
what scares you? Or what makes you most afraid?
I generally call it in like two terms, but it's failure and disapproval.
Okay.
Um, it's more on it can come from others that feeling of failure and disapproval, but sometimes it comes even from me. And I guess along the way been I've begun relating the two together, and it's so scary trying to monitor everything you say and do in fear of that.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit more about how the two have been combined recently?
um so to give a bit of context, I think it started back in high school. um I've How do I say this? So, in a simple term, I've been called a gifted child. So, like,
Haha.
it's something that stuck to me ever since childhood and until it went and I went to a specialized high school, I guess.
Wow.
And then that sort of thing, yeah, it spiraled up. And then along the way, I grew a bit arrogant, if I can call it that. I began like comparing. I think it's more of comparing comparing myself to others to feel a sort of validation. So like, oh, I you got over 100. You got this person got a 93 and I got a 95, and like inside me I'm like, oh, I am higher. So like I sort of feel validated for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it went on for like 3 months, like I that comparison thing. And then I didn't realize that others, including the people that I've began comparing myself into, um, began being so annoyed and irritated with it. And they began talking behind my back that that yeah about that. And
Wait, so they were
um
annoyed. They were annoyed that you would make comparisons.
yes, yeah, it's so I think it's in a way they think it's sort of arrogant of me to compare myself to them.
And you
I
would compare yourself vocally to them.
Yes, I used to do
Okay.
that
In high
actually.
school.
Yeah, in high school,
Okay.
and I think I was around. How old was I? I think I was 16. I think I was 16 or about to turn 16.
Okay.
And then we had after a few months, I think 3 or 4 months, we had an intervention about that. They like they call it an open forum where everyone just goes up to a person and say whatever they want to say about that person, like may it be complaints or anything related to
Mm-hmm.
that, anything they want to say to that person, they can say it. So like so I went up there, like they asked me to go up there and they began vocalizing the things that the things that I've been doing for the past few months. And I'm not gonna deny that I'm wrong. Like deep inside, I know that there's a there's I played a huge role in that. That it was not good of me to vocalize uh what what my scores are and all that.
Sure.
And then yes, it spiraled into, oh my god, like in the like right now, like what if I say something wrong and I do something wrong and it happened again? Since after that intervention, I began watching what I say, what I do, like every minuscule detail. I've been focusing on that, so like I don't
And,
offend them or anything.
and how many
So
years ago was that?
wait, so it's 2022 today. I think 3 years.
Okay.
Nearing 4 years, yeah, nearing 4 years since I'm in university right now. Um, and after a few months of that, some of them came up to me during a forum again. It was a notes thing. Like instead of speaking out loud, you give the person notes where where they write things that they want to say to you but can't vocalize it. So like yeah, they gave me notes during that forum and it was a subject related thing. Like you have to do that. You can't escape that. It's something mandatory
Hmm.
for a specific subject. So like all the things that I've seen from previous classmates during that moment, they were like, "Oh, um, you've changed so much, and I can barely recognize you or compare you towards the person that you were before." And I think that's a good thing. And so, and some of them even say, "I hope it continues like this." And I understand that coming from them, it might be a good thing. Like they were definitely observing the differences of like how I acted, but how I took what I took from it was like so I have to keep on like watching what I say every minute of the day. Like if I reply to them wrong, like will
Yeah.
they count it as disapproval? Will they like yeah,
Yeah.
it
So
started from that.
it sounds tough because like okay, so you had a problem, quote unquote, right? And then you started acting very very carefully, being very thoughtful about what you say, almost like a little bit paranoid, and want to make sure
Yes.
that you are very careful with what you say, and then everyone's like, "Hey, this is great." You know? And
Yes, I guess.
and it sounds quite tiring to police yourself that way.
hmm
Is that how is it
And
is that what you feel like you have to do?
yes, I think that generalizes it since until now, like even a simple message from even my closest friends, I would just say a simple greeting of hi, hello, good morning, and even that I would get so nervous. Like, did I use the right emojis? Did I write or did I type the correct things? Even greetings, I'm so scared of that.
Okay. And so where does the failure and disapproval come in?
um, that's I think it's more of an internal when it comes to the academics. It's I've mentioned before that I like the comparison thing that I've used to do. So instead of I think since I've started university, that's where it came from. Like comparing all, uh, I I I don't have any good study habits. That's what I'm gonna start with. I'm the type of person that I would study the same day and I would pass. So that's how it started, and it turned into like now I'm in college. So and everyone's viewing me like, um, you can do this specific thing since you came from this specific school, and right now, all I'm trying to do is not fail, even though I failed 2 subjects already, and that's like I'm just in my second year, and yeah,
It sounds tough to try to not. I mean, so it sounds like you're not really focused on learning. You're not really focused on succeeding or anything like that. You're just trying not to fail.
yes, I think that too, since um, I'm a scholar, so I need to pass. Actually, I can't afford to fail.
Okay. So stakes are high too. So it's not just about ego or expectations. Sounds like there's a real financial reason to. I mean, because if it sounds like if your grades aren't good, then you're not going to be able to go to school anymore.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I mean, and when you say disapproval, whose disapproval are you worried about?
um, Myself, my parents, and even I think it generally encompasses my family members and some of my from my friends. It's not really disapproval. It's more like disappointment that since what if they ask me for help and it's something I cannot help them with, especially in subjects that they or other people have heard that I'm good at.
I see. So it sounds like there's this. Okay, so let me understand this. See if I get this, Eleanor. So what I'm getting is that there are two Eleanors out there. One is this image that other people have of gifted child, went to a fancy school, things are easy for her. Since she's accomplished so much and went to the school, like she should be able to handle this. And friends should like, oh, like Eleanor's good at math or good at whatever. So like if you're good at math or science or chemistry or whatever, then if people come to you for help, you should be able to help them.
Yes, basically that's it.
And then there's this other Eleanor who's struggling, hasn't developed good study habits, is kind of like struggling not to fail, but heading towards failure.
Yep,
And those
yep.
seem like two very different people.
They are.
Which one's the real you?
I genuinely can't answer that, but I think it's leaning more on the latter, actually.
The failure is the real you, right?
Yes.
And that sounds really scary. Like you've already failed 2 classes, you don't know how to study. And if you lose your scholarship, like then who will you be?
I don't know who I will be after that.
Right? You certainly won't be that first person anymore. Yeah. So, Eleanor, I think it sounds. This sounds very scary because what I'm getting as I listen to you, it almost feels like. I mean, maybe I'm coming on too strong here, but it feels a little bit inevitable to me that I'm not saying this is true, but what it feels like as I hear your story is like almost like despair. Like I've already failed 2 classes and I don't know if I can turn this boat around and save myself before it's too late.
Um, I wait for a bit of context. I'm actually in an engineering program, and I'm shifting to another engineering program that I actually like. The 2 subjects that I failed were in my previous one, and I'm hoping that maybe it will change once I actually started doing what I like.
Okay. I think that's a good step in the right direction. So, Eleanor, I don't know if this kind of makes sense. Are you familiar with the term ego or ahamkar?
Um, I think I have heard the word ego from previous classes in high school.
What's your understanding of what the ego is?
Um, I'm so sorry. I can't remember it.
That's
All I
that's
can
okay.
remember is that it has something to do with oneself.
Yeah. So the ego is kind of our opinion of ourselves. And so I don't know if this kind of makes sense, but I think the problem is that neither of the two Eleanors are actually real. They're both constructions of the mind. What do you think about that?
Um, I yeah, I think it's right in a way. Like, and I'm trying to think of it, and yeah.
So help me understand, in what way does it feel right to you?
Um, it's so you've mentioned that it's not the two sides are not really me. Did I understand it right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's like I'm not the other person because the one that's like good grades, the one they ask for help uh since I think that's more of a mask more than anything, and it's
Mm-hmm.
built on expectations others have for me.
Yep.
And the latter one, that's like the one that's failing, is it's not really me, but more in a way that but more in a way that I'm trying my best that to prevent that from happening, so I'm somewhere in the middle, but not really.
Yeah. So let me put it to you this way. Do you think the Eleanor who is a failure could exist if you did not have these expectations from the outside?
um Without these expectations, I don't think I would have a concrete definition of what a failure would be.
Exactly. Right? So this is what I'm saying is that both sides of those are actually like they're based off of expectations. So it sounds like you had expectations of who you are, or other people placed expectations on you, and then almost
Mm,
as a response to that, like it's kind of like here's the real you, and people expected this, but out of any positive charge, like we have to create like a negative charge. Does that make
mm,
sense?
yes.
So this is why like gifted kids struggle so much. Like gifted kids feel like failures all the time. The gifted kids who are actually successful don't even view themselves as gifted kids. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So once you become a
Because
yeah,
because um most gifted kids that people would call gifted are actually very hardworking individuals, is how I view them.
that's how you view them because because they're different from you, right? Those are the successful ones. They're the
Yes.
hardworking ones. And what are you?
Yes.
If they're hardworking, what does that make you?
I would always call myself the lazy one.
Absolutely, right? So that's actually false too. So that is a comparison that your mind is making. Do you see that? In the same way that you used
Yes.
to compare, oh, I'm smarter because I got 100 and this person got a 93. Now you're looking at other people, you're making a comparison. This person is hardworking. They're a real gifted kid, but I'm a lazy gifted kid. Do you see how your mind is
Yes.
making that comparison?
Yes.
So this is kind of weird, but the ego makes comparisons. So if I have an identity of myself, if I say, Eleanor, I am smarter than you or stupider than you, both of those are a comparison. It's a sense of identity that is not established by me. It's established by a comparison. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
So even if you look at people who are arrogant or egotistical, they can't be arrogant or egotistical without making a comparison to someone else. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. I'm envisioning it right now, actually.
Right? And so this is the key thing. So feeling like you're arrogant or feeling like you're a failure are both determined by your relationship with the outside world.
Yes, yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
What
yes.
are you on?
It's affected
Yeah,
it's affected by external factors.
absolutely. Now, let me ask you something. When you decided to switch engineering majors, was the was the desire to switch coming from some kind of expectation from the outside or some kind of like desire from the inside?
Um I can say it's a mix of both, but desire is the thing that comes out of on top of those two.
Okay, very good. Right? So there's certainly an element to it that comes from the outside. And that the other interesting thing is like, so if let's just look at that. So what part of your desire to switch comes from the outside? Why did you like, if that kind of makes sense, if that question makes sense?
It's a family thing. They want me to take an engineering major, but I did not get into that university with that specific major. So I have to pick something that relates to engineering that they might approve of, and I did not like that. So after a year, I realized that I can't do this. So I am gonna do what I like, even though I've heard that it's so difficult. Even it's as difficult as the one that I'm taking. So I went and go. I went ahead and planned everything, since at least if I'm suffering in something that I like. If that makes sense.
Oh, so hold on. Let me understand this. So you're picking a harder major?
It's what they categorize it as harder. Every
They
major is hard if you
categorize it,
think
right?
about it. Yes.
But hold on a second, Eleanor. Aren't you like, so here you are, a lazy gifted kid who's already failed 2 classes. You're on a scholarship and you're picking a harder major? Like, oh my God, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
When you think about it, it does not.
So what are you doing there?
uh, One thing that I actually noticed was, since I started studying for the subjects of this major I'm searching at, I actually like studying these subjects compared to my previous ones. In my previous ones, I would just go, do I have to do this again? Like, I have to
Excellent.
study this again?
So
Oh,
yeah, keep going.
so, wait, I'll reveal my previous. Is it already? We reveal the major that I'm taking right now.
If you
Is
want to.
that so? Okay, I was. I mean, I currently am taking an electrical engineering major subjects, and I'm switching to a chemical engineering major. So like whenever I see circuits, I would just go, is this what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life? I would go stare at circuits. Like, I would connect wires, compute voltages, currents, and all that, and it does not make me feel like I want to graduate.
Okay.
It makes me feel like, if like it doesn't even it if I'm sorry, I'm stuttering. If I think about it, I see no future where
Okay.
with that major.
So
Like,
let's just
I
pause for a second. Okay. I understand you've got more to say, but I don't want to miss a couple of these statements. So here's an idea. Maybe if you're in a major where it makes you feel like you don't want to graduate, and if
yes.
you are in a major that you see no future in, maybe that has something to do with why you're failing, right? And I know you recognize
Yes.
that. So I think the rest of it,
Yes.
like whatever else you've got to say, is actually sort of like you've already said the most
Connected.
important things. So my point is, like, let's just think through this for a second, okay? So here you are, afraid of disapproval, afraid of failing, and there's kind of this Eleanor who's like this gifted kid, and now you're not sure if you can kind of live up to those expectations. All of those expectations come from the outside. They don't actually come from in here. And so you're afraid.
Yes.
that you're not going to be able to live up to them, and your family's like, go be an electrical engineer because they make good money and they have good jobs and things like that, right? They're like,
That's what they said.
yeah.
Like you, you touched all the topic.
And you're gifted, right, Eleanor? You're not like if you were stupid, then you couldn't learn electrical engineering. But since you're gifted, you know, like you're smart
Yes.
enough to be a brilliant electrical engineer. You can invent a computer chip. You can make so much money. You can do quantum computing. There's all these kinds of things. And so even the part of you that's afraid of disappointing people, the part of you that's kind of like afraid of being a failure, but that's like disappointing other people and then being a failure yourself. But that's even the failure yourself is you don't want to disappoint people, right? So it's their disappointment and then your disappointment with yourself for disappointing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes,
So
it's connected.
it's actually has nothing to do with you. Even your disappointment is like in disappointing other people. You with me?
Yes.
So all that is not you. And here's why I think it's good, I'm hopeful that you'll switch to your chemical engineering, because as long as you're living your life for other people, like, you know, disappointing people hurts, but it doesn't hurt as much as calculating voltages and looking at circuits. Right?
Actually, that's what I've said. I just want, like, after doing a subject, I just want, after doing exams for that specific subject, I just went on, I can't do this. I cannot do this. So after I saw my parents, I just went, Mom, I'm switching to chemical engineering. I cannot do this anymore.
Yeah. So Eleanor, let me explain something to you. I've seen this a ton of times. So some gifted kids live a life to avoid disappointing other people. And if you're living a life to avoid disappointing other people, you're living a life to avoid pain. You with me?
Yes.
And if you live a life to avoid pain, what you end up signing up for is almost certainly more painful than the disappointment. So it's like you have a choice between studying electrical engineering, hating looking at circuits for like 30 hours a week, and then you go get a job as an electrical engineer, and then you hate your job for 50 hours a week for 40 years. That amount of pain is so great that you will never succeed in that field because your whole strategy is to avoid pain. That's why you're majoring in electrical engineering in the first place. To avoid the pain of disappointing other people. Right?
Yes.
And so, like, you can't live a life where your strategy is to avoid pain. Like, it's not going to work. You're never going to become successful or live up to your potential using that strategy. You're trying to pick the least bad scenario. And that's like, you're not going to become your best self that way. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, I understand it.
So I think all of that crap about like there's two Eleanors, that's actually the same Eleanor and neither one is you. What you really are is like, if you like chemical engineering, then do chemical engineering. And like, I don't know how to say this, but the way to make people proud is actually by like living your best life, right? Because you can do electrical engineering and you may have the IQ to do it, but you're not going to make your parents proud by doing something that is painful day in and day out for like 40 years of your life. You're probably going to make your parents proud by doing something that you like, giving it 100%, and then excelling in that field.
Okay. That makes sense.
The last thing that I'm going to share with you is that I do think you have some growing to do, especially when it comes to study habits. Right? So I'm glad that you recognize, I don't think you're lazy. I think you just never needed to learn how to study. And that can be, and it's good that you picked a field that is very like enjoyable to you because that helps some. But chances are, if you really want to excel, like you're going to have to learn how to study. What do you think about that?
Yes, I definitely need to like do time management well and handle handle my subjects in a way that I just look at them and feel overwhelmed, so I never start anything. I'm at that pace.
Okay. So that's that. So like when you say handle your time management well, how?
So I've started like right now during this semester I've started like making table. So for this specific day, I'm going. Oh, I still do online classes, by the way. I don't have any like in campus classes. So for this specific day, I'm gonna finish this topic, this lecture, and in a few days I will take the quiz. But like on this day, I have to finish it and then understand. So for the next day, I'm gonna do this subject, and I think it's working pretty well. It's not all. I don't always follow it, but I mostly follow it.
Okay. And when you say it's working pretty well, what does that mean?
Um, when ever since I started doing that, I don't feel as overwhelmed as I was before.
Okay, so let's do a little bit of quick teaching, okay? That's fantastic. I'm really happy to hear that. So you're doing great, Eleanor, because you figured out a couple of things that will help you break away from the curse of being a gifted kid. So we're going to talk about the curse of being a gifted kid. So the curse of being a gifted kid is knowing what you need to do and always in your mind thinking about the what. I need to be more disciplined. I need to wake up on time. I need to get better at time management. It's always about what you need to do. Goals, 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 goals. But what the gifted kids miss is the how. They never think about the how. They don't think about scheduling and breaking things up and like to-do lists and like they don't focus on the how. They always look at the goal of what they need to accomplish. Does that make sense? So you're already doing great there.
Yes, yes.
The second thing is that gifted kids get really easily overwhelmed because they are used to being able to fit everything in their head. So like when you're like 15 and you've got 5 subjects or 7 subjects to study, you actually don't need to schedule anything because in your mind, you can hold all the things that you have to do. Does that kind of make sense? Like you can handle it when you're 15. But as you get older, you can't hold, there's too much stuff to hold in your head, and you try to hold it in your head, and then you end up getting overwhelmed because it's too much to hold. Right? So there's like, there are kids that are average IQ that have too much to carry, so they go and they get a backpack. And they learn how to use a backpack when they're like 13. But what some of us do when we're gifted kids is we can hold a lot of stuff. We've got really huge hands. So we never need a backpack. And then we're like holding more and more and more stuff. And then we start to feel overwhelmed and our brain can't break apart or manage the tasks anymore. So I think it's really great that you're doing scheduling and that it's working for you. There's one last thing that I want to share with you, which is some interesting research. So a group of researchers tried to figure out what kinds of thoughts. So if you take kids who have good grades, kids who have medium grades, and kids who have bad grades, and they tried to figure out what kind of thoughts are in this person's head. So the first thing that they looked at is they saw a bunch of kids who had this kind of thought. I want to get an A. And that did not correlate very strongly with getting an A. So if a kid is thinking all the time, I want to get an A, I want to get an A, I want to get an A, they don't actually study very much and they don't get very good grades. You with me so far?
Yes, yes.
Then they looked at another group of kids who I need to get an A. It was very important for them. It's not something that they want. It's not a desire. It's a need. I need to get an A because I need to bring my GPA up so I don't lose my scholarship. Does that make sense? Like, do you understand that kind of thinking and how it's different from the first one?
Yes, yes. It's a need, not a want.
Yeah. And do you think that leads to higher grades, the same grades, or lower grades?
Higher?
Yeah, that's what one would think, but actually leads to the same grades. Is not any better.
Oh.
Okay? Absolutely the same.
Okay.
So then they looked at the third group of kids. They asked the kids, okay, for the kids who actually get A's, what's in your head? And it's really interesting. The kids who get A's, in their head, they don't think about what they want. They don't want an A. They don't need an A. What they think about is, I'm going to go to the library Wednesday at 3 p.m. and study for an hour. They actually don't care about the goal. They focus on the how.
Oh.
So there's like data on this that you can look at kids who get good grades and they don't think about what they want or what they need. They just, not just, But the strongest variable that correlates with good grades is actually like being very specific with scheduling. I'm going to go to the library Wednesday at 3 p.m. and I'm going to study chemistry. Thursday at 4 p.m., it's going to be physics. Friday morning at 10 a.m. is going to be review for my chemistry test on Friday afternoon.
Okay. Yep. I understand.
So this is what's so tricky is once we're like a gifted kid, we develop this like ego or this idea, right? Like, oh, I gotta be this. I have to live up to expectations. And then to think about this, your mind is so busy. Like every time you sit down to study, you can't even think about the studying. All you're thinking about is, I hate this. All you're thinking about is, if I hate this, how am I going to get an A? All you're thinking about is, if I hate this and I can't get an A, what am I going to tell my parents? I'm going to lose my scholarship. And then you sit down, you have a textbook in front of you, and for 1 hour, you're not actually doing any studying. You're not lazy. How do you feel at the end of that hour? You feel exhausted. You're just spending a bunch of energy doing stuff that isn't studying.
Yes.
And then people think I'm lazy.
I definitely do that.
Yep. And so the reason you're failing is not because you're stupid, not because you're lazy. It's because your mind is doing a lot of work that isn't schoolwork. And it's, it's that simple. And so I think the more you can let go of what other people want, they can be disappointed in you if they want. Right? Because something else, hopefully you'll learn at some point in your life, is you can't make someone else happy.
Okay. Yep.
Right? It's kind of weird. Simple to say it. Hard to really realize. And the more that you kind of listen to what you want, and what I love about this more than anything, the reason I'm actually pretty hopeful for you is because you're scheduling this stuff out. And the more that you schedule, the better you just show up, you do your work for the day. And are you going to get an A, a B, or a C? Who the hell knows? But the kids who get A's are the ones who show up and do the work. And that's what we call disciplined. Right? Those are the hardworking people.
Yes.
And here you are scheduling tasks and actually doing them. Maybe you're more hardworking than you realize. Any last thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
I have no questions. I'm actually trying to digest everything. The curse of the gifted kids. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The curse of the gifted kids is really something.
Yeah, it's really interesting what it does to people's mind. Right? And because gifted kids spend so much time trying to make other people happy, they just have no cognitive energy left to actually perform. You're trying to live up to your own expectations, trying to live up to their expectations, when all you need to be doing is learning how a circuit works.
Yes.
Right? But you're doing so much other stuff. So good luck to you, Eleanor.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling in.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
All right, let's move on. Does that make sense, chat? We good there? Man, it's hard, dude. If you're spending your whole life trying to live up to other people's expectations, you're not going to have a whole lot of energy for actually doing the stuff that you're supposed to do. Hello.
Up. Hey.
Hey, what's up?
Wait, let me just turn off the stream that I got.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, right? And then let me just turn on my own camera.
Okay.
There we go. Hey.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi, what's up?
What's up, dude?
The topic was fear, right?
Yeah.
I had this prompt. So the thing I fear most, I said, was time.
Okay.
And that's a weird thing to fear because, how can you be scared of a physical dimension, right? It's not like I'm looking at clocks and watches and I go, oh my God, there's a watch. What do I do with that? I think the actual thing that I'm scared of if, is the passing of time, right?
Okay.
And I thought about a lot about that, which I thought about like I try to go into like analysis of what are the elements of the passing of time that I'm scared of specifically. Is it like human mortality? Is it human aging? Is it the fact that we're all getting older and inevitably going to die, which is not a negative thing in itself? Or is it doors closing? Like that's the thing I thought about a lot because I had like I think I still have a kind of career crisis, so to speak, which is as an 18-year-old, which path do I take? There's this expectation of, you're supposed to take one path and stick with it. And it's not just an expectation, it's just because of the physical nature of time. I hope I'm not going too deep into this, but because of just the very physical nature of time, there is no other way than just doing one thing and not doing other things at the same time. You just can't do one thing physically at a time. Um, so that's a bit overwhelming. And I think the other dimensions are not just me aging, but the people around me. And the Stoic perspective on this. I think, and I don't know if I remember this correctly, I think you read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations
Mm-hmm.
some time in your life. I did too, and it was really transformative for me. A lot of the Stoic wisdom helped me grow and uh, feel kind of this kind of tranquility. And one of those things was Marcus Aurelius's wisdom of saying, you can leave life at any moment and let that determine what you do and say and think. And that feeling turned into fear sometime.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, look, what do you go by?
Just call me Schwab. I think that's cool.
Schraub? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Schraub. So you're afraid of the passage of time, it sounds like?
Yeah, I think so. I
Okay.
think so.
I totally, you're saying, how can you be afraid of a physical dimension? I am terrified of height. It's a physical.
Okay, I see.
That's, I'm kidding. But yeah, but what scares you about the passage of time?
That's such a good question. I think it's, I did a nursing internship this year just to, I'm going, way out of this. I'm going on a tangent, but I'm going to come right back to the topic, I promise. I was in a nursing internship this year to see if I actually liked or wanted to study medicine. That was my initial plan. I went to psychology instead because I was, rejected at the med schools. They have really high expectations of the grades and everything. But I was like, do I actually want to do this? And then I went into the internship. I went at the station, saw a lot of patients with like diabetes, and it was an interesting experience. But there was one thought all the time of, I could be doing other things right now. Like this day that I'm spending here in the hospital doing basically no real work, washing the dishes and switching out the urine bottles. Someone has to do it, of course. But doing all of that, I could be writing music right now, was for example a thought I had. And I was like, I will never get this exact day back. Money, which is a thing people think about when they want to study medicine, of course, is you can grow that back basically. If you have debt, you can pay it off. If you have a lack of money, you can earn more, but time is not like that. And a nurse told me once that I studied psychology, and he told me that, if you want a job with that has an income that is okay and quite good, and you have a lot of time, a good work-life balance, go and stay in psychology. But if you want to lose and sacrifice a lot of your time, go be a doctor. And that made me think a lot about like, time versus money and versus other things, and that led to some kind of thought spiral, I think.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you're. Let me just think about this for a second. And are you like afraid of death or anything?
I don't think so.
Okay,
No,
I'm not
no.
getting that vibe. So it's not so much like, so you shared with us what your exploration of why you're afraid of the passage of time is. It seems like mortality is not a big part of that.
No, not anymore. It was when I was like 13 or so. But
Okay,
who hasn't had that phase?
so the thing that resonates with me the most about what you're saying is like you can't do more than one thing at a time, and that time is like a limited resource. And once
Yeah.
like you spend one, like, so you can always make more money, right? So you can like, if you were to trade an hour of your life for some amount of dollar, there is some way you can alter that equation so that 1 hour can be worth $10 or $50 or $500 or $5. So you can manipulate the game a little bit there, But when it comes to time, like there's nothing you can do to get more time.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
And so then what that means is that if you spend a certain amount of time in the wrong decision, then like that time is wasted.
And not only that, but also you will never be as young as you were. Think about that. You know, you get older and your
Sure.
functions get worse. I saw all these old patients, and I was like, I will be there too one day.
Yeah.
Go to the cemetery and see that you will lie there too.
Yeah. So it's like once it's gone forever.
Yeah.
And so it's this precious, limited thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. What's time
So what do
for?
What's the purpose of time, you ask?
Yeah. What's it for?
Its function or like?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have not even the slightest idea.
Okay.
I think it's better
Hold-
the way it is.
Hold on a second. So here you are, afraid of wasting this resource,
Yeah.
right? You're terrified of wasting
Right.
the resource. And I ask you,
course.
what's the resource for?
Yeah.
And what's your
it
answer?
has no function. It's just
Then why
there.
the fuck do you care about wasting it?
Well, because it doesn't change like its physical nature, right? It's like I don't know how to tell you this, but like it is as if someone were to like come at me, or there was an earthquake going on, and I was like, oh shit, there's an earthquake, and you were telling me that don't be scared. The earthquake has no intention of doing anything.
I
It's
didn't
still
tell you
there,
not to be
you know what I'm saying?
scared. Hold on a second.
Sorry, didn't get that.
I know it's really weird. So we're going to help you with this, but the reason we're going to help you with this is because we're going to try this from an angle that people don't usually take, which is going to be confusing, okay? So
Yeah.
so like time is a resource. You're afraid of squandering your resource. Fair enough?
Sure, yeah.
What's the resource for?
Nothing.
Then why are you afraid of squandering it?
Because it will soon be gone.
But what difference? It's like, okay, so do you play games, Shrab?
Yeah, sure.
What game do you play?
Like FPS games, Overwatch and the like, Valorant. That's
Okay.
that kind of game.
Hard for me to use an analogy there because so I'm thinking about any kind of
Yes.
game that has like resources, right? So let's say like I'm playing Monopoly, and it's
Right.
like here I am terrified of losing my Monopoly money.
Yeah.
And then people are like, but why are you afraid of you losing your Monopoly money? It's like that has no real value. Like, what's the value of the resource?
Yeah, right.
So I'm not saying you're foolish, not by any means, but I think this is not how we really think about it, because you're thinking my time is limited.
Yeah.
But what I'm sort of saying is like, what is the time for? Like, why is the resource valuable to you?
What makes it so valuable?
Is that it's limited.
Yeah, just like
But-
currency, for example, like money.
Yeah, but
Right.
but sure. So
Yeah.
but like it's kind of like weird. It's like, I understand that limited resources increase their value,
Yeah.
but what's it for? Because if it has
Yeah.
no,
okay. You make me rethink the whole thing. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Right.
So
Okay. Yeah.
so I agree that you've got a finite number of time, but what's it for?
So like, it has no specific purpose, right? But what does it change about like my biography, let's say, or like my history at the end of the day being finite, right? The time that I have being finite, and for example, the career crisis, just as an example. What does that change about the like openness of the answers to the question of which career do I choose? I can't say time has no specific function, but I think that's not like kind of I don't know how to translate it into pragmatic real life solutions.
Yeah, so I think, and that's the problem. So here, first thing is that time absolutely has a function. Like, just think about that, right?
Okay.
Like, in a way, it's our most valuable resource.
It is, yeah.
But what is it valuable for?
Spending it, like doing stuff.
Now we're getting
Yeah.
somewhere. So
Yeah.
what's the function of spending time?
I think it is, I don't know how to say it in English, there's a German word for it. But there is
Use the German word.
in itself.
Huh?
You know what I mean? It is not a means to like spending time to me is not a means to an end. It's just purpose in and of itself, like doing it for the sake of itself, right? For its own sake.
Yeah, well, so and therein could be your problem. So I would say that time has a very specific purpose that is not just inherently valuable. If it's inherently valuable, then you just want more of it without it being worth anything externally, right?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
But I think that's your problem, is that you're not thinking about it as an externally valuable resource. It's like a pile of gold because gold has value in and of itself. No, gold doesn't have any. I mean, sure, you could do it that way. You can stockpile. You can be on a desert island with no one else around, and you can have 1,000 kilos of gold because gold is valuable and has inherent value. That's the way that I see you using your time. You're miserly with it.
Yeah, right. Because it has inherent value. It's like.
And so you're unwilling to spend it.
Right.
And you're 18 years old. You got a shit ton of time left. And here you are.
Who knows?
Huh?
Well, who knows? Like Memento Mori and stuff, right? Who knows? That's another thing. Like, it's so uncertain how much I have left. Like, with the gold pile, you can count it. But, like, with the time, who knows if a bus driver doesn't see me tomorrow, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So how are you going to use this resource if you only have one day left on this earth?
Like, I don't think it's the fact that there's too little or too few options. I think there's too many. And the fact that you can just do one at a time.
Schraub,
Like, there's so much stuff to do.
I'm going to do something that could be a lack of compassion. I need you to check me and tell me if what I'm doing is frustrating for you, okay?
I'll tell you. I'll
Okay.
let you know.
So, because I think this is going to hopefully help you, but it's going to be like, okay, if you had one day left on this earth,
Yes.
you're right, you could do anything with it. What would you actually do?
I don't even have to think about it. I think I would just go ahead and play. Like, I've got a piano behind me. I would just go ahead and play it. I'll play something. Like.
But it's so limited. You only have one left. One day
Yeah.
left.
So what? I will play the music. Like, that's the best thing to do.
But you've got one day left.
Yeah, so
What if it's not the right thing?
Yeah, but like, okay, so if it's not the right thing, I think it is the right thing.
How the fuck do you
I
know?
think it is. There's no logical reason behind it. I don't know. Don't you have like these things where like you know that you gotta do them, but there's no logic behind why? You just do them.
Okay.
And that's playing the piano for me.
Okay.
That was an unexpected answer, wasn't it?
Huh?
I'm sorry if that was not the answer.
No,
you
it's
wanted.
exactly the answer that I wanted.
Right.
Because now what we've done is something really bizarre. I have a ton of time ahead of me, and I have no idea what to do with it. Because
Yeah.
because your mind is like all this logical bullshit, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
like what about this and opportunity cost and this and this and this and this and this? And somehow, if we reduce your time to something really small, and I ask you, what are you going to do with it? You're like, I'm going to play the piano. And then here I am with the logic. And I'm like, no, bro, like it's the wrong thing. What if it's the wrong thing? There's so many other things you could do with your life. You know?
Well, it is. the wrong
You could
thing.
play a
It's
video
like-
game. You could jerk off a little bit. Like, whatever. There's so many things you could do.
Till October, right? Yeah.
And you're like, no, this is the right thing. And it's like, it feels right to me.
But I can't just go ahead and play. Like, what if I? And that's the other thing. Some people ask, what if I die tomorrow? And I'm like, what if I don't? Like, if I play the piano today and tomorrow and the day after that, I can't send my projects that I have to send. Like,
Yeah.
for
That's
my deadlines.
that's a great point, right? So here's what I'm kind of hearing. So if you're like, all right, Dr. K, if you're saying live every day like it was your last, you'd fail out of college tomorrow, you'd never pay rent, you wouldn't even have groceries in your house because I'm gonna play the piano tomorrow and tomorrow comes and now I've run out of food and like I'm not gonna go to the grocery store today because that's not how I want to spend my last day on earth.
Yeah, right.
I'm gonna play the piano.
So
Okay,
the answer
so-
changes.
Absolutely. Okay. So now let me ask you, if you had 1 week left on this earth, what would you want to do with it?
Oh, that's difficult for me to answer spontaneously. I think, do you want a like concrete, specific answer
Yeah.
to that? Oh man. That is where I think the way that you responded to me in the 1 day example, like, what if it's the wrong thing and all that? And that
It's
is
just
blocking
1
me
week.
from doing anything. I think I would spend the entire week thinking about what to do.
Okay, what if it was 2 days?
I'm not really sure. I
2
think that
days.
would be a bit overwhelming. Yeah, like I would be like, holy shit, I'm gonna die. I think that was what I would do. Maybe like reading the meditations to calm me down or something like that. But
Okay.
not sure. Yeah.
Okay. So here's a couple things. So the first is that time is I'm going to share a couple thoughts with you, okay? So like if we think about, are you familiar at all with calculus?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. So like, calculus is like the area under the curve.
Yeah.
It's an oversimplification. I don't understand calculus very well. Okay. So
That's okay.
here's what I'd encourage you to do. The first is to think about if you lived for one day, how would you want to spend that day? If you lived for 1 week, how would you want to spend that week? Right? So like if you live for 1 week, there's certain practicalities. So you say like, okay, fine. So I want to play piano. That's really what I want to do before I die. But I don't want to spend, let's say my week starts on Monday. I don't want to spend Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in starvation. So I should probably go to the grocery store on Tuesday. So I'm going to play piano for 6 hours on Monday, 6 hours on Tuesday. I'm going to go to the grocery store and get some food. And if I've got 1 week left, I probably want to spend some time with my family. So what I'm going to do is like, I'll go see my family on Wednesday or Thursday. And then like, and I should probably shower somewhere in there and like I'm running out of soap. So maybe I can get some soap. Does that make sense? Like we could actually probably, if we sat down and worked on it for about 15, 20 minutes, I'd ask you like, Schraub, what's important to you in life? And you'd say, my family is important to me. I'd want to look through Marcus Aurelius's Meditations one last time. Right? And then I'm going to also do a little bit of grocery shopping. I want to like eat some food that's really good. And I'd be like, okay, Schraub, do you want to eat like fried heavy food every single day for a week? And then you'd be like, well, probably not. Like I probably need to get like some kind of salad or something in there because you can't just eat like fried cake for 7 days. You're going to feel terrible, right? So you want to have some...
You know you're dying, right? So for example... Okay, right. Yeah, I agree.
Right?
I agree.
So now let's think about like if you were living for 1 month, how would you live your life?
Well, a month is more time, right? Yeah. Okay. So what I'm getting from the 1 week example, I think I can like take that and
Good.
just transfer it in the sense of like being a bit more. I don't want to say pragmatic, but I have a lack of another word for that. Like think about the actual thing in itself. I think I'm very theoretical about the whole thing, but if you think about it, life is real, right? So you do really wake up. You really do have a day. You do have stuff. Your life doesn't radically change. My room doesn't change its colors and all that. So I would just go about my days the way I did before, like take walks, talk to my family, do all that stuff, and be like, of course I'm gonna be dead in a month, but think about it. If I die in 30 days, in 29 days, I will still be alive. So 10 minutes before I die, I'm still alive. So what, right?
So would you be afraid if you were dying in a month?
I think sure. I think it's like evolution made us.
But just like a normal amount of fear, right? Would you be like terrified of the amount of time that's passing in that month?
I don't think so. I'm like, you know what? You don't even have to ask yourself the question of when am I gonna die? Like the problem is I don't know whether I'm gonna die or live tomorrow. But if I know when it is, I'm like, all right, I can plan.
Okay.
Like I have a fixed amount. I can plan correctly because fixed.
And so what we're seeing is that if you had 1 day left on this earth, you're grinning. Why are you grinning, Schraub?
Well, I think there's some kind of contradiction between all the things I'm saying.
Yeah, you're damn right there is.
Yeah, there's some kind of... I'm not seeing it, but there is.
Yeah, there's a huge contradiction. And we're about to lay it out, okay?
Yeah.
Schraub is 18 years old and is afraid of the passage of time, for making mistakes. And what if you make the wrong mistake? And what if you go to nursing school and you don't like being a nurse and now you've wasted 4 years of your life? But what if you want to be a doctor and getting into medical school is hard? And if you spend 8 years of your life becoming a doctor and then you don't like it? What if you become a psychologist and psychologist isn't the right move? Right? Because then what if you really want to make music? Like what then? So you don't know how to spend your time because it's a limited resource and you don't know when you're ever going to get it back. And yet if I ask you, if I limit it a ton, if I say, Schraub, you have 1 hour left on this earth, you're going to be like, peace out, Dr. K, I'm going to play some piano. Yeah. And then if we give you 1 day, it changes a little bit. Like you're going to take a dump somewhere in there, right? And
sure.
And if you have a week left, now like normal life starts to come in. You're going to do a little bit of grocery shopping. If you have 1 month left, you're still going to play a lot of piano.
Yeah.
But then you're going to do like some of these other like practical things. If I give you a year, Now it's like, okay, well, like maybe like I'm going to learn this and now I can like learn a language before I die, right? Like you can do something that's a little bit more substantial, a little bit more fulfilling. Like maybe you can actually write a song within 1 year.
Yeah.
And then if I give you 5 years, now it's like, well, hold on a second. Like if I'm alive for 5 years, I need to financially be able to support myself for that amount of time and some amount of luxury and comfort. And I've always wanted to visit Indonesia. So I need to make enough money to do that. And then if I give you 10 years, now you're like, okay, well, I absolutely want to make an album, but like I need to support myself and I kind of like psychology and like maybe I'll study that. And if that doesn't work, that's sort of unfortunate, but I think you'd be okay with that.
What do you mean by that? Like a bit more
Like
specific. Sorry.
I think if does this sort of making sense? First of all, we'll get to the psychology bit in a
Yeah,
second.
sure. Okay, we don't need to go into specifics.
No, we will, but you kind of see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
So I think like the way you should live your life if you're afraid of the passage of time is like, and in my mind, this somehow reminds me of calculus, which is like there's this area under the curve. And what we actually have to do is like, what we want to do is an integral of all of those different possibilities.
I see.
So if I like think about,
I don't see the analogy, like the connection.
yeah, it may be a bad analogy. So forget about the calculus. But what I'm saying is like, if I take like one day, if I take 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years, and I average them all together, that's the way you should live today.
Okay. So you do you mean by that on the one hand, like being pragmatic in a way, the way you said it with the groceries and
Yeah.
all that, and on the other hand, doing the thing that just illogically, irrationally feels right to do, and
But approach it almost but the more time we add, the less illogical it becomes, right? So if you really love music, right? And sure, like you can become a psychologist, and that's where I'd say like go do music therapy, like easy, right?
for example. But that's a problem. Like, can I go into the specifics of that?
Sure.
Maybe after. Okay, you wanted to say something.
I mean, you can go into this. So I recognize that the more we get back to your life, the more objections your mind is going to have.
Yeah, right.
Right. So now
And
the
I
last.
think so.
The last thing that I'm going to kind of share with you, actually two more things. One is that time is a resource, right?
Right.
And it's not a vague resource that's used for, I don't know what. It's used for very specific things all the time.
Yeah, it is.
So time can be used as an exchange for money. Money can be used in exchange for security. So time is a security. Time is used for fulfillment. Time is used for exploration. Time is used for enjoyment. It's used for all of these things. So I don't think it's like a vague resource that has no value. I think quite the opposite. It's very valuable. And this is the key thing, is that I don't think you should, in a way, worry about wasting it, because I don't think it's a waste. So if you spend 4 years of your life studying something to discover that this is not how you want to spend the remaining 50 years of your life, I actually think that's a pretty good investment.
Well, but you have to spend, like, let's say I study psychology and I'm at the end of my bachelor's, right? And I'm like, you know what? I actually want to become a physician. So I go do that for like 6 years. I could have done that earlier, right? And the other thing is I'm 30 at the end of
What's
that.
the
So
value of being a physician when you're 30 versus 24?
your back hurts less, just as like as one example for yourself. Your back hurts
But
less. You can see better.
that has nothing to do with being a physician. That has to do with being 30 versus 24.
Yeah, exactly. But like you're at the start of your career.
So
Okay, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. You're gonna be 30 anyways. So right? You're gonna be 30 anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm seeing it. Yeah. How could I not see that? How the hell? All right.
Tell us
Yeah.
what you saw.
Like, I was like, all right. Imagine I applied for like medical school. The problem is not that they would reject me anymore. They would accept me, but that's the terrifying thing, right? They would accept me. I would have to like study it for say 6, 7 years, and then I would have to go into residency for like another 4 or 5, and then I would be like, holy shit, I'm 32, 33 at that age. Maybe I'm calculating wrong. But then I'm like, you're gonna be 32 or 33 anyways. It's not the problem of doing the job so late in your life. The problem is that you're scared of back pain and macular degeneration and all that, right? Yeah. Or the other factors. I'm not really
No,
sure.
no. I mean, I'm more concerned
I
about
think
your
that-
concern for the specifics of macular degeneration.
Yeah, well, I'm just scared of all my bodily functions being, worse than they were before. Like, I want to enjoy life the way I do right now with all the emotions and my body working the way it does, and I
So-
want that to be happening for a long time.
So, Schraub, I'll leave you with a couple of other thoughts. The first is that last thing this is a whole new can of worms, okay? But I feel like it's important, so I'm going to leave you with this. You seem like you're a thinker. So, first thing is that you have an assumption that youth has more enjoyment than old age.
I think so, yeah.
You have an assumption that there are right choices and wrong choices. That picking the career,
Yeah.
if you pick the wrong career, that will lead to unhappiness, and picking the right career will lead to happiness.
The one that fits to you specifically, yeah.
And that implies that you are static and you have to find the right article of clothing that fits to you, as opposed to any amount of internal change to fit whatever the circumstances.
I think what I fear, I think I'm gonna keep it very short. I'm not wasting your time here, but I fear being you see what I did there, right? I always think about when I was in the hospital, I thought about myself sitting in or lying in the hospital as a 90-year-old or 100-year-old person who's looking back and saying, oh shit, I should have taken the other path. I think I'm scared of regretting the thing when I'm older, being like, oh shit, now I can't turn back time. Why did I do that? I was so foolish.
Great point, Schraub. So let me ask you, what are the different ways that one can handle or deal with regret? One thing that you're saying is a solution is making a choice that avoids regret.
Yeah.
What are your other options?
Well, that's the abusive relationship between future me and current me. Current me is always dictating, it's like an inner dictator saying to myself, you have to be optimal with everything, because if not, then future me is gonna have to, pay for that. But then again, future me every time was like, you know what, I'm actually not, even though I have to pay for that, I can deal with it. Like, I hope I'm not getting too confusing with this, but
No,
past me, yeah.
So let me see if I understand you. So first of all, you use the phrase abusive relationship. So what you're doing is trying to prevent regret for future me by whipping yourself now and suffering a ton now so that you can avoid suffering in the future.
Yeah.
And then what you're kind of saying is, even if future me rolls around and things aren't ideal, like future you can handle it, right?
It was the case before. I am the future me of past me.
So let me just understand this. So like, you're suffering today so that you can set up a good tomorrow, even though if tomorrow is not ideal, you can handle it then, and you don't necessarily have to suffer as much.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is guaranteeing suffering today for a question mark of avoiding suffering tomorrow. How do you think about that as a time utilization strategy?
I think it is. I think the way I'm doing it, like the way I'm treating myself, is very. I think it is in fact tyrannical. I think it is the way a dictator does it, right, with like orders and all that. And I think that is a terrible way to go at it. But I think you can do it the way a democratic leader can do it, right? Like.
So I agree it's tyrannical, but
cooperation
I'm going to ask the question again. So what you're doing is guaranteeing suffering today for the possibility of avoiding suffering tomorrow.
So it's optimal.
Okay, let's think about that for a second. So if you have a strategy of guaranteeing suffering today for a good life tomorrow, how do you think that strategy works with a limited amount of time?
Not at all.
Okay, so tomorrow, what is tyrannical you going to do?
Order more stuff.
You're going to suffer.
Like,
the day after that,
orders.
Today's Monday, right? So Tuesday, you're going to suffer more. Wednesday, what is tyrannical you going to do?
The same.
So you're telling me that you're going to choose the guaranteed suffering for today to protect yourself from suffering tomorrow, but when tomorrow rolls around, you're going to just suffer anyway.
Well, it feels like I have so little autonomy over what the dictator is saying in a way. It's weird. It's a weird way to say it, but
I'm with
yeah,
you, but do you realize
yeah.
that that's not the only way it works? That's the worst strategy. Because
In
you
fact, it
could
is.
get hit by a bus tomorrow.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is like the only suffering, like you can't control the future, right? So you don't know if you're going to suffer tomorrow or be happy tomorrow. All you can control today is what you do today. And today you choose the guaranteed suffering.
Yeah.
Like, what the
Every
fuck,
single
bro?
day. Right.
Like, so what? You're going to be 80 years old. You're going to be terrified about the passage of time. You're not going to use it because you're a miser. And you're going to set yourself up for a better tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then you're going to get hit by a bus at the age of 76.
And I suffered before that. Right.
It's all you did your entire life.
And it's so unnecessary too.
You're right.
Yeah. I think I'm seeing it.
So what
Potentially.
are you going to do about it, Schraub?
Well, I do want to like not have the dictator be the way he is, so to speak, but I don't know how to do it. Like very specifically, very pragmatically, like I want real life solutions for myself, right? I don't know how I'd go about changing that. Like, yeah.
Why do you need real life solutions?
You know, I can think about
If I
my
gave you
own-
real life solutions right now and you implemented them, what would that mean for you?
I think I would just ignore them because they weren't mine. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, fair enough. But what I'm
Yeah.
kind of pointing out is that if I were to give you solutions that were ideal and you could implement, you would optimize your life, right?
Yes, the way I always did things.
And
Like,
so
I
you're
always
not,
did-
that's actually the tyrant winning.
Yeah.
Do you see that? It's the same, like,
Yeah.
even if I give you optimal solutions, optimal for what? To optimize your fucking time management. It's giving into the tyrant anyway.
Yeah, I would be tricking you if you did that.
Yep, you would be.
Yeah, I would.
So I'm not going to fall into it. So I'll ask you again, what should you do today? And coming up with an optimal practical solution is absolutely the wrong answer.
What should I do today?
Yeah. What are you going to do about this?
Anything. Whatever. Doesn't like anything.
Keep
something.
going. Yeah. Oh, hold on.
Anything at all.
Anything. It doesn't what?
It doesn't matter. Like
You're absolutely right.
anything.
Anything.
Yeah.
It
Or
doesn't
nothing,
matter.
if you want to.
Or nothing.
Yeah.
Even better. Do nothing today.
Right. But it feels like I'm not really believing what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's because the tyrant is terrified. Because you're about to throw you see that?
Yeah.
The tyrant is like, oh shit, this is a
You're witnessing
revolution.
a coup d'etat. Yeah. You're witnessing a coup. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
So and then you're saying, I don't know how to control the tyrant. So now you've got a choice. You could tell the tyrant to go fuck himself. And we're going to play the piano today, and we're going to hang out, and we're not going to, like, we're going to waste today, and we're going to live today to the fullest. And the tyrant's going to be like, oh, so that's an optimizing strategy, right? And you're like, nope. If it's optimal, we're not going to do it.
But how does one overthrow themselves? Like
You do
how does
nothing.
that happen? Ah, I see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you're witnessing me like rethinking the whole thing, and that takes time. It's the thing that you always say, right? With thinking for a second and all of that. Yeah.
It's
But
okay.
like,
It's okay
yeah.
to waste your time.
Okay, so
You have to give yourself
I
permission.
don't mean to like extend the conversation. We're gonna end it in the next few minutes. I know that, but like I'm thinking about society and, for example, with the whole med school thing, right? It is my decision whether I do that, whether I become a physician and all that. And when I realized that, it doesn't matter, you can just do whatever you want, do whatever, right? Time is not this thing that has its inherent value. Just do the thing. Society is not going to change, and the program's not going to change. And then the thing happens that when you are in med school, the like dictator becomes something external, so to speak, like the hospital calls, right? That's not something you can control. So if I change my opinion, I have no choice anymore. I have to go. The patients need me and all that, right? That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, so you've got to be super careful about a couple of other things. So the first is that the tyrant does not like the track of the old conversation.
Okay.
So
see.
that now the tyrant is like, even if you overthrow me, you're not going to be able to overthrow the world.
Yeah, all right.
right? So I'm not going to engage in that, not because of a lack of time, but just because I don't want you to pivot away from where I think you need to forget about the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just how you want to spend your days. And I don't think that time has no value. I think time is incredibly valuable, and I think it's limited. But I think part of the value of time is exploration. And I'm not hearing that from you at all. That it's all about making the right decision, but you're not allowing for like experimentation to figure out what's right for you. Second thing,
yeah, right.
Second thing is that I think that you've got to be careful about regret, because the way to live life is not to avoid regret. It's to be able to do damage control in regret situations. And that too frees you up from your decision-making paralysis, because if you can do damage control afterward, you don't need to make the right choice. Third,
I'm sorry, man. I think the connection is.
Oh shit! Did you miss that?
I didn't hear the last two sentences.
Okay.
The last two.
So let's try to summarize. So you're afraid of time, right? You're afraid of the passage of time. You're afraid of making the wrong choice. You're afraid of wasting time. It's this limited resource that you can never get back. Totally get you. Now, there are a couple of things. When I ask you, like, what is time for? Like, what's the resource used for? I'm not... And your first answer was like, I don't know. Right? So here you are hoarding a resource that has no apparent utility for a part of your mind. I think you recognize on some level it has utility. So time is absolutely a resource. Is it limited? Sure. But it's not about making right choices or wrong choices, because you can't know. Like, you're not omniscient. So the purpose of using time is to figure out what you want to do with your life. Like, it's supposed to be wasted.
You know, like you can figure out stuff, but like, where is this? Do you have the like spark, the thing where you're like, oh my god, that's the thing?
Yeah,
that's
of course.
thing,
You have the spark.
I like that.
You have the spark.
Okay.
When did you find your own spark today? I asked you one question. You had an answer that you were not going to be shaken from. What was that?
Yeah, the piano thing.
Absolutely. The spark's there.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Right? And what happens to the spark? The spark gets overthrown by the tyrant. The tyrant says, hey, let's live a shitty life today for the hope of a better life tomorrow. And then every day that goes, and all you guarantee is that for 5 years of your life, you're living your worst life possible. That's a terrible trade, man. You're actually using to squander your time on a daily basis. And then you kind of say, but what about the real world? Like, I can't just live the life of hedonism and play the piano. And you're like, I'm like, absolutely right. So what's the strategy? The strategy is think about how you want to, like, if you had 1 day left on this earth, what would you do? If you had 1 week left on this earth, what would you do? If you had 1 month left, what would you do? If you had 1 year left, what would you do? If you had 5 years, what would you do? And then somewhere through that process, as you average those things together, you're not thinking, and this is the problem, because your life is like is not limited. The interesting thing is, you say that time is a limited resource, but the more we limit your time, the more the more you're like, this is what I want to do with my life.
Yeah.
That's the contradiction that you were finding.
Right.
It's really bizarre.
It might be like the less time there's left, the less I fear being suboptimal with it.
Exactly. Which is the weird contradiction. That 18-year-olds think they have an infinite amount of time, and so you want to do the 24. You want to do stuff at 24 instead of at 30. What you know?
Right.
Because then I can optimize the next 66 years of my life. But if I really push you to it and I say you've got 1 day left on this earth, what do you want to do? And that's the way you live it. And one last thing that I'll kind of leave with you is sort of an analogy that may not make a whole lot of sense. So I actually found this to be like, I realized this as a parent.
Okay.
And maybe in a way, I almost think this is easier to understand, which is, how do you want to raise your kids? If my kids were alive for 1 day, what would I do with them? If they were alive for 1 week, what would I do with them? If I had 5 years left on this earth with my kids, I would not spend every day being hedonistic. Right? It's like, let's think about, what do I want to instill in my child before I am gone from this earth? Like, I actually don't want to teach them to just be complete degenerates for 5 years and go on vacations the whole time, right? I want to teach them how to live life. And I'd almost encourage you to think about yourself that way. is if you had
Okay.
5 years left with yourself, like what kind, like if you died on your deathbed, would you regret a life of hedonism? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you regret a life of absolute suffering for tomorrow? Absolutely. I should have had more fun. And somewhere in the middle of 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, you will find how you should live today.
And also, I would, the people, the me who was like retired and laying in the bed, I would be able to deal with that. Like that's something I'm ignoring all the time. Like I have dealt with so much suboptimal stuff that wasn't perfect. Who says I can't do that in the future, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for this conversation. I know there's two people waiting in the queue, and I also know that,
So time conscious.
yes, I'm very time conscious. So first of all, but second, I think it's polite and I think it's fair and nice,
Yeah,
right?
I appreciate it.
Independently of time. So, and I think that that is something. I think there is a point where if I get like, so to speak, stimulated, or I get so much food for thought. There's more than just a satiety to it. You don't want to give me a food for thought coma, right? So I think that's the point
Sure.
where I would say, that's enough. Um, then I would, like to thank you.
You're very
I
welcome, Schraub.
yeah, I watched your videos, I think a year ago I started watching them. And the fact that there was a nursing internship, for example, and all those patients, they got all the help and they liked the experience and all that. We got that connection. That's thanks to you. That's a domino effect that you created. My friends feeling more happy, my family being more stable than it was a year ago. Me being here, having overcome this anxiety, I think you know how much direct impact you have, but like the whole AoE healing thing, you have created such immense domino effects can't even begin to understand. So I want to thank you for doing that
You're
and spending your time like this, because that's even if it's not optimal, it's good.
you're very welcome, Schraub. Thank you for sharing that. And good luck to you, my dude.
Well, thank you. It was
Adios.
nice. See ya.
All right, so don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of wasting your time, chat. It's not waste; it's using it, right? So we did a summary. So let's hop into the next one. Great guy, by the way. So polite. Who's next?
Ready?
Let's do it. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. A little stressed. No, more stressed than I thought I'd be, but yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that. Can you tell me what you go by, my friend?
Uh, Online it's usually KO, but my name's Quentin.
What would you like me to call you?
Whichever one's easier for you to pronounce.
Okay, we can go with. You said KO?
Yes.
Okay, let's go with KO. Yeah. So tell me what do you happen to be afraid of, KO?
I say it's twofold, but it's both related to social anxiety in general. There's the mostly romantic fear of being alone for my whole life. Romantically, I mean. And then there's some people can approach anxiety. It's basically I kind of isolated it to I have trouble trusting other people with judging me accurately, I would say. I'm afraid of involuntarily doing something that's immoral.
Involuntary doing something that what?
That is immoral. Wrong.
Okay. Can you give me an example of what would be involuntarily immoral?
Mostly what I'm afraid of is being like labeled a creep, or in my country there's a law against sexual harassment that I think is overly broad, and I'm afraid of being misinterpreted as doing something that could fall under that.
Has that happened to you?
It hasn't happened to me, but it's happened to people I know. Not with the law itself, but social consequences for something that's been misunderstood.
Can you, um, do you feel like I'm really curious about that, but I don't want to, I want to respect privacy and things like that. But it really helps me to understand like what's an example of something like that happening.
Okay, so I have a friend who started out really skinny, and he was making progress on that, and he shared his progress via a picture where he was wearing a t-shirt, which the person that he sent the picture to ended up regretting that, and he ended up being ostracized from his friend group because of that.
Okay. So they shared a picture of them with clothes on.
Yes.
And this was
And
interpreted by someone else as what exactly?
as being overly sexual, and the people in that group are convinced that he was actually not wearing clothes in this picture, and that's the story they have.
Interesting.
Yes.
That sounds really scary.
Yeah, that would be scary, yes.
And so you're afraid of doing something similar.
Kind of, yeah. I'm afraid of, messing up that way, and I think I'm afraid of trusting people to be charitable with me in that sort of context.
Okay. How long have you been afraid of trusting people to be charitable?
I I don't think I can answer that question. I've had issues with trusting people ever since I was a kid. But I don't know that it's the exact same fear of it's morphed into something else as I've aged. So it's somewhere between 20 years and a few months.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about the fear of being romantically lonely?
Okay, that's easier. It's basically there's a whole aspect of life that I don't think I can experience by myself, and it's something that I want to experience, and I feel like I'm missing out on it by remaining single.
And what is responsible for you missing out on it?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Why do you think you've missed out on it so far? Or have you missed out on it so far? Let's start there.
Mostly, yes. I've had a relationship that lasted a year and a half,
Okay.
that ended 5 years ago. But aside from that, there hasn't been anything.
Okay. And so how do you understand why you haven't been in a relationship for 5 years?
There's multiple factors, but mostly it's me not having enough opportunities to potentially get in a relationship, in a relationship, and not taking these opportunities, or maybe not being good enough for these opportunities.
Okay. Not having opportunities,
Yes.
not taking opportunities. And what was the third thing? Not being good enough?
Yes.
What does that mean to be not good enough for an opportunity?
In that context, that would be, you have a member of your preferred sex, you go talk to them, and they reject you because you're not what they're looking for. Yeah, and
And
not good enough would be everyone, or most people will reject you because you're not good enough for most people.
and do you believe that you are good enough for most people?
I don't know. If I'm rational about it, I think I have stuff to offer, but I
And
don't
if you're
feel like I do.
okay, that's a very, very good insight. I'm not saying that you don't have enough to offer, but to recognize that sometimes we're conflicted in terms of our self-esteem, right? That like even if you know you have a lot to offer, sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And what I'm also hearing is that maybe you've passed on certain opportunities because you were afraid of being perceived as a creep.
Yes.
Do you
It's,
do you know how to flirt, Kale?
I don't think I do.
Okay. Um, are you able to have conversations and or friendships with people of your preferred sex?
Yes.
Are you able to express romantic interest in them?
That's more difficult. I've had romantic interests in the past, both before and after my relationship started and ended. But it's always been like, it's been difficult. It's been a hurdle to pass through.
Okay. Um, can I think for a second, Kale?
Sure.
So I'm kind of curious, how much do you think is like a lack of opportunities versus you not taking those opportunities?
I think it's 75% a lack of opportunities, with 25% not taking them. But it's also like there's responsibility for me not putting myself in a place where there would be opportunities as well.
What would that look like, putting yourself in a place where there are opportunities?
That's part of the problem, is that I'm not sure. But I guess my strategy, quote unquote, right now is I join groups and I see if there are people that are potentially, attractive there. And if there isn't, I either stay in the group because it's cool, or I leave the group and find another one.
And what happens if there is someone who's attractive there?
That hasn't happened in like 2 years, I think.
How many people have you met in 2 years?
One. And
No, I
that
mean, how many
was,
total people? Like, so you say you're joining groups and like leaving groups and stuff like, so give me the total number of people that you've met over like a 2 year period.
Okay, I don't have a precise number,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's
Like
between
ballpark,
30 and 50, I'd say.
30 and 50?
Yeah.
So like maybe like 15 to 25 people a year?
I properly met where I've had a conversation with them, yes.
That's a fair amount of people.
Is it?
I think so, right? Like, I think it could be, the number could be more, but it's not like it's like the number is 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I think meeting like 25 people a year is like a fair amount.
I think that depends on what you mean by meeting.
So I like the way you define it as having one conversation at least. Right?
Yeah, we can go with that.
So here's what I'm hearing, Ko. So the first is, let's just try to like, I'm going to walk you through my thought process and then you let me know like what resonates with you or what you think is fair and what you think is unfair. So sometimes in life we're like lonely and we want to have a romantic interest. And there are all kinds of things that can get in the way of that. So the first thing that can get in the way of that is like simple exposure. So I can be lonely and be physically alone for like a whole year where I sort of have, maybe I live at home, I hang out with my family a little bit, but I have a very limited social circle. I don't meet new people. And so in that situation, loneliness is like more of a practical thing, or not more of, there is a practical component of like, I'm literally not meeting people on a monthly basis. So I just don't encounter new human beings. Does that make sense? Like
Yes.
as one of the reasons, okay? Then the
Yes.
next reason is that let's say we fix that. So everyone's like, oh, just go out and stuff, right? So there's like a lot of advice on the internet that's just like, go put yourself out there. And so then what happens is people are like, okay, so much like yourself, like we're going to approach this problem. We're going to be pretty practical about it. There's a group of people that presumably is getting together around some kind of interest. Is that fair?
Yes.
right? So then you're like, okay, I'm gonna do that thing where I meet this group of people. They have an interest, so I have a reason to show up. We have some kind of common cause or shared interest. And then I'm gonna like engage people in conversation. So it sounds like you've done that and you've actually put yourself out there. I think sort of being attracted to one person in a 2-year period is not unusual. Like, I think that sounds like pretty, you know, it's a little bit on the lower end, but it's not that unusual. Like, I think if you meet 50 people, or let's say 40, I think it's not unreasonable to be like pretty into one out of those 40 people. So then the issue kind of becomes, I think there are a couple of other things, which is that I'm guessing that you probably, actually, let me ask you this. How long does it take you to figure out if you're into someone?
There's two components to this. There's the physical component, and that takes seconds to figure out. And then there's what I call conversational chemistry, where you can have a conversation with someone and it doesn't feel like you're working for that conversation.
Sure. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, that takes a bit longer.
Okay.
You can develop that over multiple conversations, but generally when it happens, and you know when it happens.
And with this person that you did meet, what was that interaction like?
So for context, I used to work at McDonald's, and that's where we met. We used to work together. We had some conversations in between work, and at some point I asked her, "Hey, do you want to meet outside of work?" And she said she said no, because she had to spend time with her boyfriend and all that. So it was a soft rejection because she was already taken and not interested. That's fine.
And
It doesn't. Go ahead.
did you feel like you did something involuntarily immoral there?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
It's kind of a specific context where you're already together, you're already talking, and it's not like meeting someone who's a total stranger, just asking them out.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree. I think that was actually a very healthy interaction. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, it was completely fine.
Okay. So kind of going back to like the list of stuff, right? So there's not meeting enough people. So it sounds like you've taken a serious effort at like meeting more people. It sounds like you're pretty picky for the most part. I don't know if that's even fair to say, but I mean, it sounds like, if you meet like, let's say 30 or 40 people, you're kind of into one of them. It sounds like conversation is sort of important to you. But what I'm kind of concerned about is, a couple of things. One is that you're kind of concerned about being seen as a creep. You have difficulty sort of trusting other people. How do you think that affects your social interactions?
You mean, how does it affect me mentally?
Sure.
It's probably making me more tense and less approachable, I would say.
And what are you afraid of in those situations?
That I'll do or say something that'll cause me to be ostracized or lose reputation or even get arrested, but that's a bit extreme.
And have you ever been ostracized or lost reputation, as you put it?
It's happened in middle school, I would say.
Okay.
I mean, I was struggling in middle school with much of the same issue, much of the same fear of loneliness, and I was not as respectful of people's boundaries. I guess you could say I was a little shit, but most people are in middle school.
Okay.
And yeah, so
It sounds like you're smiling.
I kind of am. It's different times, but yeah, I think I've really hurt other people by doing that when I was in high school. And in turn, I've also been pretty severely bullied as well in primary and middle school. So
Okay.
I didn't have much of a reputation to lose, but I have lost friends
And
over that stuff.
can you tell me how your first relationship started and ended?
Sure. So that was way later when I was in, let's say, college, but it's not exactly college. I was in Russian class, and there was a girl who went to the same tram station as I do. So we just went together, we talked. And one day the Russian teacher wasn't there, so we spent the 2 hours together. And eventually, at the end of these 2 hours, she told me she spoke about her boyfriend, and I was really devastated. And that's when I realized I had feelings for her. And then a couple of weeks later, she texts me. One thing leads to another. We end up in a relationship.
How does one thing lead to another? Wait, hold on. That's the important part. So she texts you
Yes.
and says what?
And I don't remember exactly what it was because it was a long time ago, but we just chat, kind of like what we do when going to the tram. We speak, we talk about stuff, and eventually she confesses to me and says, "Yeah, I love you. I want to be with you." And we end up meeting the day after, and we made it official.
Okay. And how did the relationship end?
Lasted a year and a half, and eventually I think it became routine. I was struggling with not knowing what I wanted to do with my life and having trouble with finding like the meaning of life. And I think that showed, and eventually just the relationship became routine. So she called me, we met, it didn't go well, and we ended up separating at that point.
So it was KO, is that right?
Yes.
So KO, when you like hang out with people, do you feel like an outsider?
Yes. Very often.
And are there any people that you would like that you feel like you're not an outsider with?
It's actually a difficult question because there's multiple ways of feeling like an outsider. There's feeling like you're not on the same level as these people, and there's feeling like you're not part of the group for as long as the others, so there's a past that you don't share, and so you're not as integrated in the group.
Yeah. So it sounds like you feel all that stuff.
Yeah.
So KO, here's kind of what I'm hearing. So I kind of hear you as like the word that comes to mind more than anything else is an outsider. So what I'm kind of hearing is that you're kind of doing everything right? So you're like being careful about how you interact with people. You're not doing anything involuntarily immoral. You're also not like nice guy TM kind of stuff. Or you know what I mean by that?
I think I do. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So like you're not like creating these like relationships that have false expectations. You're also when you are attracted to someone being explicit and kind of asking them out, and then they'll say, "Oh, I have a boyfriend," and they're like, sucks, but that's like so. It sounds like you're kind of doing everything right, but it doesn't seem to be working. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, although I would say I try, not that I actually do.
What help me understand the difference?
I think I try to do the right thing. I don't know for sure that I am factually doing the right thing.
Okay. So sure. Right. So, but you can only control what you do, right? You don't know if it's going to, like, for example, if that person that your coworker had said, yes, let's go out on a date, like, then that would have been the right thing. Do you consider that? I mean, is that the right thing or the wrong thing in your mind?
I think we can call it the right thing, yes.
I think so too. So what I'm sort of hearing is that like even though you kind of like bounce around, like you're not really integrated into a group, you kind of hang out at the edges. Like I'm imagining like I just have this picture in my mind of like a fire. Someone has lit a fire outside, like a fire pit, right? So there's sort of like a campfire, and everyone's kind of like sitting around the campfire, and it's really warm, and they're laughing, and they're like near the warmth. But you're kind of like at the edge of the circle, a little bit half in shadow. It's a little bit chillier there. You're kind of like right on the edge where no one really minds that you're there, but you're not really like a part of the group. Does that image resonate with you at all?
Very much so, yes, although there's a significant exception, which is the LARP group I'm part of.
The what?
LARP group.
Live action role playing? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so do you feel like being a part of the LARP circle makes it hard to be a part of other circles?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
It's mostly the opposite, actually.
Help me understand that.
It's the first group I've actually managed to join.
No, I know, but what about other groups? Do people discriminate against you because you're a LARPer?
Oh no, like most people don't know, and if they do, like I don't actually care.
Okay.
I've walked around town in armor, and I didn't mind people just looking at me.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, Ko, here's kind of... so here are a couple of things that I'd sort of leave you with. And I want to say there's like a few different things here. One is that I think this like trust issues that you've got probably needs to be worked on in some way. So I don't think it's a bad idea to do something like see a therapist, but really thinking through like what the impact of being bullied and sort of being ostracized in middle school, like whether that kind of continues to affect your thoughts and your behaviors, I think is like worth doing some damage control on. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
But then what I'd like to do is try to give you some like more practical thoughts. I'm not going to quite call it advice, but what I'm hearing is that you've got decent social skills, but that you're not really willing to be like open and vulnerable to people. Fair?
You're correct on the second, but I don't know exactly that I have good social skills.
Okay. So we'll get to that in a second. But I mean, I think part of the issue here is that, you know, it sounds like what really, like you can be physically attracted to someone, but really having like a serious or, if engaging conversation, that you're attracted to people's minds just as much as their bodies. Is that fair to say?
That would be fair, yes.
And I think the challenge is that with a combination of maybe rusty social skills or, like not knowing how to flirt and not knowing how to be vulnerable, it's hard to form like connections where you can see the best side of people.
That makes sense.
So what I'm sort of envisioning is, first of all, that you increase the amount of people that you interact with, but also change the way that you interact with them. And kind of like, I don't want this to sound like put yourself out there, but I think that you're not really giving other people the opportunity to know you because you're afraid of rejection. And therefore, you're not really like getting to know other people. Right? So you're not so sometimes what can be very attractive, for lack of a better term, is when someone accepts us for who we are in spite of some flaw that we demonstrate to them. That can be like a very, very meaningful connection. And I'm not hearing that that's really an opportunity for you.
I'm not sure I understand.
So like, there are some parts of you that you're embarrassed about, right? Like your social anxiety is like, don't tell people that. Yes, no?
I hadn't thought about it like that, but maybe. We'll go with yes.
Okay, let's go with yes. And so when you do something that's a little bit, let's say like, it sounds like you're concerned about how people are going to react to you, so you hold a lot back. Maybe that's a better way to say it. Does that?
Yes.
So then like I'm just going to put it to you, like, so when you're holding a lot back, it's hard for people to accept you because you're not offering them anything. Does that make sense? You're not like showing them like who you are. And so if you show them who you are and they're like, hey, we really like KO, like Quentin's a great guy. And then like that sows the seeds for like a deeper relationship. But I'm not hearing that as an opportunity that you really give other people because you're so concerned about how they're going to react.
I think that's fair, yes.
So so I think that's kind of the general goal, is to be a little bit more vulnerable and open with people. I do think if you increase the number of people that you get a chance to meet, that's going to help a lot, right? So like maybe it's just, you just need to increase the numbers of people that you get kind of interactions with. So increase the number of interactions, be a little bit more vulnerable. And what that sort of means is that doesn't mean you have to like trauma dump them, but that means that there are going to be some times in social interactions where you're going to want to say something and your mind is going to tell you, don't say that. And instead of listening to your mind, I want you to be a little bit critical of that part of you and really figure out, okay, is this like, am I making like a Nazi joke? Then like maybe don't say it. But you know, be a little bit critical. And if it's like, I'm afraid of how this person will react, I think you still got to test the waters a little bit. Does that make sense? So I wouldn't just trust that instinct of not talking.
Right. Yeah, I think I see what you're talking about.
And then I think there are a couple of other things that practically you probably... Have you ever asked any of your friends if they have anyone that they can set you up with?
Not directly, no.
What does that mean, not directly?
I've mentioned that I want to meet more people and do that.
And do what?
Like talk to them and figure out, like, see if there's people around them that they know could potentially like me.
Okay, I think I'm getting a sense of the indirectness.
Yeah, but I haven't asked them, hey, do you know anyone that you could set me up with?
Yeah, so what do you think about asking that?
I think it's terrifying, honestly.
What's terrifying about it?
I think it could be inappropriate. I think it could be bringing something that is potentially not wanted in the friendship. Not because I'm asking them out directly, but because I'm talking about something that maybe isn't there, that maybe friends aren't there to provide.
Okay. So yeah, so I think that there's a lot here, KO, that I would call it sort of negotiating against yourself. So it's not an obligation. Your friends aren't there to provide you with a mate. I'll completely concede that. And I think it's within the acceptable range of social interactions. If you're looking for a romantic partner and you have people who are close friends that are vested in your happiness, to say, hey, do you know anyone who's like, who you think would be like a good fit? I'm looking to date. Does that sound inappropriate to you?
No, if you put it like that, I'm having trouble imagining myself doing that.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of like practical stuff here that you kind of got to learn. One is like, so the advantage of meeting 25 to 50 people a year is that it makes it easier for those 25 to 50 people to introduce you to 25 or 50 people, so that you don't have to do all the legwork of like showing up in an entirely new group. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense.
So like when you're at the edge of one campfire and one person is on the inner circle, if you accompany that person to a different campfire, it's going to be easier to get into the second campfire. Does that make sense?
Totally, yes.
And I think that's something that it sounds like you're not really taking advantage of. And so what I would really encourage you to do is very practically just let your friends know, hey, I'm interested in like dating. Do y'all know anyone who you think would be a good fit? And maybe kids don't do that anymore. Like, I don't even know. I'm dated when it comes to this stuff. But I think just sort of letting people know and not saying like, I don't think anyone is expecting responsibility for finding you a life partner when you say something like that. But they may know someone. And people love to play matchmaker, even if they're terrible at it. Like, I don't know if you kind of know that or not, but people really love it. The last thing is that even if you're not really attracted to that person or it's not a great fit, I think it's a good chance for you to learn how to like practice your social skills and also like to learn how to flirt. Like, I think you probably need to learn how to flirt because I think that's an important skill for finding, a romantic partner. What do you think?
Totally agree on the flirting. That's something I could try. Yes.
Okay, so it's easy for me to say learn how to flirt. Easy. What's your understanding of what flirting is?
The definition would be playful teasing, but what that means concretely, I don't know.
I'm with you. So I think this is the problem is that there aren't classes for this kind of thing. So, so like I'll give you, so like the playful teasing I think is great. So I know it's kind of weird, but you got to just sometimes people are going to say stuff and you've got something that's kind of like funny in your mind. I'm thinking, does that make sense?
Yeah, that happens.
And then you don't say it, right?
That also happens.
And so unless it's like part of what I think is considered like restricted speech, right? So I would not make jokes that are like racist or homophobic or like anti a particular religion. But otherwise, like if it's kind of funny, even if it's a little bit like risky, I think it's okay to try. And then there's another skill that you can use, which is like checking in after you do it. So if you make a joke and then you can ask people like, hey, I don't know if that was a little bit too much. Did I overstep? And you can just ask people for feedback on what you said. And then oftentimes their response, even if they say, no, it was fine, but if they're like, no, it was fine, then you'll get an answer. So I think a big reason that people don't learn how to communicate is because we don't know how to ask for feedback around communication. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So I would do things that are a little bit riskier in your mind, and then I would ask for feedback. With me?
Yeah, it's scary, but it's less scary.
Okay. So next thing is like, I'll just give you an example of flirting. So I practiced a lot of flirting with like old ladies. So that I learned how to flirt with people so sometimes it's like easy to practice flirting with people that are clearly and completely not a viable romantic partner. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So that's the key thing. So and you can get in trouble for that kind of thing. But like, so for example, when I was in medical school, like old ladies with cancer would always make comments about my hair. They'd be like, you have such lovely hair. And then I joke with them. And I'd be like, I can't believe you're saying that right in front of your husband. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
right?
very funny, actually.
It's pretty funny, right? I say it with a smile. Husband laughs. Patient laughs. Totally fine. Right? And then we like get to professionalism. And so then it's like, hey, like, let's take a look at your medications for today. And then you kind of like slip it. You can make like one comment. And it's not like, so a couple of things about being creepy is a big part of creepiness is persistence. So not reading signals from people is like creepy. Second part of being creepy is being way too much in your head. So what that means is you're so like concerned about reading signals from people that you're not actually like relaxed and interacting with them in a free way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I think this is what happens. This is why people struggle to flirt and like socialize, because half the time you're in your own head trying to figure out like, okay, what's okay to say, what's not okay to say. You're worried about being involuntarily immoral, which by the way, I don't know how to like, there are other things about that too, where you can just ask people for permission around certain things or feedback. These are two tools that are very, very helpful in social situations. So you can even like, You can even ask a friend, for example. Like if you're concerned about, how to ask them to set you up with someone, you can say, hey, I've got kind of a weird thing. I don't normally ask my friends this kind of thing, but I wanted to get your thoughts about, thinking about asking you and a few other people if you knew anyone that you thought would be a good fit. Do you think that's a fair thing to ask? Or do you think that's inappropriate? Just ask them. And then you'll get answers from them. And if they say, yeah, that's inappropriate, then you come across as thoughtful, right? And you're like, okay, thank you very much for telling me that. I really appreciate the feedback. Chances are they're not going to say that. They're going to say, no, it's totally fine to ask. Then you have permission. Then you can ask, okay, do you happen to know anyone that you think would be like a good match? I'm looking to date. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So asking for permission, asking for feedback, playful teasing, which can start out with like jokes that you don't normally say that are, you don't want to be offensive. Because I think that it's really the feet, and then recognizing that creepiness is, first of all, being way too much in your head. And secondly, like being persistent when people are telling you no. So I'm not worried about that for you. That's why I'm telling you to be a little bit riskier, because I think you're on the other side. So there was this girl that you liked at work. You asked her out. She mentioned she had a boyfriend. I'm not hearing that you continued to like pester her or anything like that.
Certainly not. Right?
And then even with that girl, like I would just follow up with like, hey, do you have any friends who are a lot like you that, if y'all have a good relationship, right? So even if it's like a friendship, you could say, totally understand. Of course you're taken. Lol. Do you happen to know anyone that you think would be like, do you have any friends that, you think I would be a good fit with?
Right.
How does that sound?
It's a little scary, I'm not going to lie, but it's less scary.
What makes it less scary?
It sounds less inappropriate in my head.
What makes it sound less inappropriate?
You're clearly respecting boundaries, I would say.
Beautiful. So I think respect should always be there. And right now, KO, what I'm hearing from you is that the main thing that your compass is not respect. Your compass is fear of consequences. And like, it needs to be respect, always. Especially with flirtation. That's really important. Like, what makes flirting okay or not okay is the respect underneath. That I acknowledge that this person has their own thoughts and feelings. They're not there to meet my emotional needs, physical needs, or anything like that. Right? And just respect the other person. And it's not like that's a substitute. And respect is not something that is just shown through behavior. I think it's internal too. But I think, ask for friends to introduce you to more friends, even let people know that you're interested in dating and do they know anyone. And then I would ask for permission if you're going to, do something that you think is a little bit inappropriate, and ask for feedback afterward. And then you'll start to get more confident once you get those kinds of feedback. Because what I'm hearing, KO, is that you're trying to figure out how to interact with the outside world, but you're only doing the experimentation in your head. I'm sure you play through thousands of scenarios, but like you never like get data from the real world.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so like it's going to be impossible for you to develop confidence. It's like you're a theoretician instead of like actually getting experimental data. And so I think you've got to start interacting with people a little bit more, like letting your needs be known a little bit more, not holding people responsible for meeting those needs, which is a completely reasonable thing. Very insightful for you, by the way. So here's the last tip I'll leave you is that you're so concerned, you're so thoughtful about how other people think. I would explicitly state that if you're concerned about something. So you can say, like it just as an example, because I think it's a beautiful thing to say, which is, hey, I'm interested in like dating again. And I was wondering if you know anyone who you think would be a good fit. By the way, I recognize that This is just like a, if you know someone, like I'm not expecting you to find me, the love of my life. Right? So even acknowledging the responsibility that you could be placing on them and even explicitly saying, hey, I'm not expecting that responsibility from you. I'm just wondering.
Okay.
Questions?
I think I'm going to need some time to digest that.
Yep.
If you...
I threw a lot at you. What did you get from what I said? I can try to summarize in a second, but let me just see where you are.
Ask my friends for possible connections and be respectful of boundaries, but not because I'm afraid of consequences, but like internalize the concept of boundaries, I would say.
Great.
And be a bit more risky in interactions as well.
Yeah. I thought that was a great summary. So here's what I'd kind of say from the top. So the first thing, KO, is it sounds like you're very, very thoughtful about the interactions that you have with other people. You're very much in your head. You've also struggled a little bit with bullying and self-esteem issues and ostracization in the past. So you may be a little bit sensitive to that. And what this sort of results in is that you have a lot going on internally. And I think that gets in the way of you feeling free and fully participating in social situations. So this is the campfire thing where everyone's sitting there, they're not thinking about how other people will react. They're just kind of like vibing with each other and laughing and stuff like that. And you're kind of making these like calculated movements into the circle. But it's all like very unnatural. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so you can't, and in that situation, you can't offer your freest and most attractive self. And you can't form deep connections with people because you're so calculating and they're so free that there's like, you're so concerned about being ostracized or maybe like, these broadly applied sexual harassment laws or whatever. Like you're afraid of like hurting people's feelings and offending them. So you really filter a lot of what you say, which keeps you on the outside of the circle because then you can't laugh with everyone, right? Because they make a joke, you laugh, and then you're calculating about what's the right joke to make. So that's kind of like at a high level. More practically, what I would do is the friendships that you have is try to leverage those friendships into further connections, both platonic and romantic, right? So even letting your friends know, like, okay, so you're in the LARP group and these are your hardcore friends. And for the LARP group, say like, hey, I'm interested in doing other things besides LARPing. What else are y'all into? Or if you have a friend who you meet at work or something like that, you can sort of say like, hey, fall is rolling around, winter is rolling around. I'm looking for to explore new things in the city. Like, is there anything that you're into that, I don't know exactly how to phrase that, but so, I'm interested in trying out new stuff. I'm doing this thing at the end of 2022 where I want to try to increase, I'm blanking on what to say, but just sort of letting people know you're open to doing new things. Like, hey, I'm interested in trying new things. Is there anything that you really enjoy doing that, you would recommend?
Okay.
So sort of letting platonic friends know, also letting people know that you're interested in dating. And you can even ask them a little bit about, hey, is it okay that I asked you this? And then the next thing is to remember that generally speaking, being a creep is about not respecting boundaries and being way too much in your head. So so to be a little bit less controlled in your mind, be a little bit riskier with what you say. Don't say anything offensive, and don't say anything that always base your statements in respect. And then the last thing is to explicitly practice communication skills, especially something like flirting, which is playful teasing. And if you're concerned about flirting, you want to start with things that are people that are clearly not someone that you have romantic interest in. And of course, there are caveats to that, right? So you don't want to be hitting on your friend's mom, for example. But you can flirt a little bit here or there. And it's kind of playful teasing, innuendo statements, I think are really, really good ways to flirt. Even asking friends that you have no romantic interest in, hey, can I practice flirting? Or be a little bit flirtatious? But I think you're going to need to learn some of those skills to really like form heavier connections with people. And as you form heavier connections with people, I think you may find yourself being more open to dating than, 1 out of 50. It could be like 1 out of 25.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then I think I'm just trying to think about. I feel like we can talk more about flirting, but I think that's a good place to start. Any questions about that?
No, I think I'm gonna have to investigate that on my own. I think.
Yeah. The last thing, KO, is I get the sense that you're holding yourself back a lot because you're afraid of the consequences.
Yes, I think that's fair.
And I think that's where like you got to you got to focus on damage control and getting the social skills to be able to repair minor faults, as opposed to trying to play the perfect game. Because then what's happening is you're never actually like, you're just playing these, like you're running hypothetical scenarios in your head instead of actually like leveling up on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair.
All right. Good luck to you, my dude.
Yeah. Thank you for everything, and yeah, thank you very much.
All right, let's do one more. Yeah, I feel like we gotta just do a class on flirting. We'll figure that out one day. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I need to turn on the camera.
Cool.
Hello.
Hello. What do you go by, my friend?
Sophia.
Sophia?
Sophia.
Sophia. Thank you for clarifying. And what are you scared of, Sophia?
So the prompt, the thing that I wrote was, I'm afraid that I'll always be living my life on other people's terms and never be able to fully live my life the way I want to, without always considering how it affects other people.
Okay, so the first thing that
Yeah.
I'm noticing is that there were a lot of terms like always or fully.
Mm-hmm.
So can you read out that prompt answer again?
Yeah, so I'm afraid that I'll always be living my life on other people's terms. And I'm specifically meaning my family.
Okay.
And for future relationships, I can get into that a little bit, but I'm always afraid that I'll never be able to live my life the way I want to, because I always consider my actions in regards to how it will affect other people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear more about that, but let me just start with a couple of clarifications. So when you say, I always consider other people, is it, I mean, because that sounds almost like, I'm trying to figure out, if you consider other people, does that mean you end up doing what they're saying, or you just consider their viewpoint and then you end up, it's okay for you to do what you want to do?
Depends a lot on the people. So if my actions have actual consequences, if I feel like I make a selfish choice that will negatively impact other people, then I could maybe do something else. That's kind of the feeling that I get, even though if it's something that I actually want to do.
Okay. So I'm going to toss this out now, but I have no idea if it applies to you or not.
Mm-hmm.
Some little like spidey sense just popped off in my head that I wonder if other people or you are making yourself more responsible for other people.
I mean, sure, yeah. So I also wrote a little notes about my family and the
Okay.
background around that, and it's pretty spot on.
Okay. So tell us by all means.
So I have a pretty complex family. also pretty complex family dynamics. I have 3 sisters, and it's never really an issue about that I want to disappoint other people, or I kind of just, I'm fine doing my own thing. It's if my actions actually have consequences that hurt other people. So, like, my dad always blames my mom a lot for a lot of things, and I've always kind of been the fixer of my family, the emotional fixer and practical stuff. So I've always been kind of not the therapy friend, but the therapy sister, you know? There's been a lot of, and still is, conflict and drama between everyone, and I've not as much lately, the last year, but I've always sort of been the one that provided, not, they wouldn't even call it emotional support, I'm pretty sure. They would, but just, because I would listen, but I would also try to make people meet in the middle. So I would be more of a fixer than just, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm here for you, blah, 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 all of that. Right? So, and the thing is that I've also been like that with my parents. So from...
Okay, so Sophia,
Yeah.
I really want to hear the rest of what you have to say. I really
Sure.
do. But I can't let some of this stuff slide. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you for permission to interrupt you. So if you want to give me the rest of your notes, you can absolutely, I will shut up.
No,
But,
go ahead.
okay. So number one is it sounds like your family is not aware. They take for granted that some people provide them with emotional support. They have a lack of awareness that emotional support is being provided.
So I think it was like that, but maybe I think because it's very strange. My family is a little bit strange because we have this very open discussion about a lot of things, but then it might happen between some individuals. So some sisters will talk about another issue because it's always this. It's mostly my parents that aren't as aware, and one
Okay.
sibling. So, and they're the ones kind of creating the problems a lot of the time.
It makes sense. Can I ask you another question?
Sure.
When you said that sometimes your actions have real selfish consequences, can you
Yeah.
give me an example of an action that has real selfish consequences?
Yeah, so my dad is Moroccan. We live in Denmark. I'm half Danish, half Moroccan. So
Okay.
my mom is ethnically Danish. She converted and is Muslim now in her own way. So we've been sorta raised Muslim, right? So the thing that I always come back to is I don't fully know the consequences if, for example, I would say, oh, I am not Muslim, or oh, maybe I'm bisexual, or oh, all of these things that would go against sort of how we were raised. The real consequences could be that the family would sort of break apart because my dad would then blame my mom and for, oh my god, you raised them, blah blah blah, all of that, right? um so it's kind of weird that it's not actually like, it's not made up in my head. The consequences, they might be, I mean, it's a possibility, maybe.
No, I don't.
That it
I don't
would
think they're
just,
made up in your
yeah.
head. I think
Yeah.
that those sound. I think you've come to expect that because you grew up in your family.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say, I'm happy you shared that, is that if you turn out to be an agnostic bisexual, it's your mom's fault.
Sure. Yeah.
Is it your mom's fault?
No, I mean, and that's the thing that I've maybe the last year, maybe half a year, that I've always been a little bit protective of
Well,
my
so
mom, right?
Hold,
And
hold on a second, Sophia. I just had a
yeah.
thought. Is there any chance that your family members will listen to this or find this? Because I don't want to They're
No, no,
gonna
no.
recognize your face, or
So
I mean your voice or anything.
no,
Okay.
I mean, no, and it's also a choice that I am making.
Okay.
So I am starting to become a little bit more selfish.
Okay.
So if
Good.
it may come out, then that's a choice that I've decided to make,
Help
right?
me understand that choice.
It's not a choice that I would have made a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
because of the consequences it could have, right?
Right.
Like I know that my dad would never find it right, so it would only be. I don't think anyone would find it unless I told them. I might tell them. I don't know yet. Because we do have a open conversation about a lot of stuff, including my mom, actually.
But help me understand how. So you said you're starting to be a little bit more selfish.
Mm-hmm.
How dare you be bisexual? Oh my God, so selfish, Sophia.
Yeah, I know. It could tear apart the family.
All right.
Right?
So now I'm going to ask you a question. If it tears apart their family, who's responsible?
So I would feel like I would be responsible, right?
Mhm.
But I'm just living my life, But yeah. But it is still kind of my responsibility.
There we
right?
go. Right.
A little bit,
So
Yeah.
here's what's going on now, Sophia. Let's understand this. So we gotta be straight, okay? Because here you are, like, oh my God, like I get to be bisexual, like, that's just me living my life. I don't have to restrict who I love based on my parents, but because that's what the internet tells you, right? Like independence, and you live your life. And you do whatever you want to, and you believe in God if you want to, you don't believe in God and you want to, like, right? But the truth of the matter is that you live in a situation where, for better or for worse, you recognize that living your life could tear apart your family.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can say that's your family's responsibility, right? And at the same time, I think this is something that, like, we don't acknowledge often enough, is that you recognize that your actions, very much so, very concretely, whether it's fair or not, that your actions can lead down one path or another path. And so I get the sense that you feel responsible because you, like, if you walk into the house and you're like, hey, Dad, guess who doesn't believe in God? And
Yeah. That would be
maybe
interesting.
Yeah, it would be bad.
Yeah.
Right? Because y'all have grown up in a particular way that's not acceptable. I'm also hearing that it seems like your dad, you mentioned this earlier explicitly, but I'm sort of hearing this as well, where it seems like your dad blames your mom for somewhat random things that he's unhappy with.
He's an interesting person. He's very sort of emotionally unstable, kinda. I mean, he's very big highs and big lows, but the lows are filled with anger, So he doesn't talk about emotion. He doesn't, you can do whatever you want type of thing. I can make everything work. And he kind of does. He just uses other people.
What do you mean he uses other people?
So, like, he kind of creates chaos wherever he goes. So I, for example, have access to his email and his bank account, actually, from when I was a child. Because he kind of creates problems, and sometimes not, it doesn't pay a bill, or maybe, and then it's like, oh, come and fix this. I don't know how to do it. You know how to do it, so why don't you do it, type thing. And I have always kind of figure out how to do stuff, right? So that's probably why I'm pretty good at being a fixer, right?
Sophia, are you sad that you had to grow up in this kind of situation?
Yeah.
It sounds like I feel a lot of. I don't like this emotion in some ways because it almost implies superiority, but like I almost feel like I do feel a lot of pity for you. Like this sounds like you don't deserve any of this. Like to have access to email and bank accounts as a kid because your parent doesn't pay their bills and then somehow makes it your problem?
Yeah. Of course I would have preferred not to do that and not to have that responsibility, right? And just live a carefree life, I guess. And I've always blamed or blamed my dad and not had an interesting relationship with him, not liked him in certain ways, but I've always kind of done it because
Survival?
yeah, but also because to sort of protect my mom because she has a lot of anxiety, and when things are chaotic, she doesn't thrive in that environment, so I've always kind of done it for her, and now I've transitioned a little bit more into also being a little bit angry with her. And that's why I think I'm
That's
a
probably
little bit
healthy.
more selfish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, I think it's interesting that you even frame it as selfish. So it kind of is, right? Because you're putting, I don't even know that you're putting yourself first, but I think you're in the line somewhere now. Whereas I'm hearing that you, and I'm also hearing a ton of responsibility on your shoulders. Like, and that your needs come absolutely last and probably don't get met at all.
Yeah, that's probably true. Or it is true, At least it was. It's changed a little bit lately.
So what are you afraid of?
Yeah. So I'm afraid that I'll never actually just do things because I want to do them. And because I do it in other relationships too,
How so?
So I've never had a romantic relationship. Um, I always run away if it gets too close. I think I don't want anyone to become dependent on me for their happiness. I don't want any more people to deal with in that sense. I also have difficulty being dependent on other people,
Sure.
Makes sense. And so I've never really had that many friends growing up, but it changed when I got to university. And yeah, so, but I usually find friends that are as independent as me or people that I know are like actually good people and don't have a selfish bone in their body because then I don't have to worry about, someone.
What would happen if you had a friend who had a selfish bone in their body?
So it's not a trait that I like. And the moment that I feel some people.
We all know the answer. Just say it,
Yeah.
Sophia. What'll happen?
They'll try to take advantage of me, and I don't want that. So
You don't
why
want
even
that.
engage?
But will you let yourself be taken advantage of?
No. So yeah.
So interestingly enough, I'm going to push back on that, challenge that statement. So I think the reason you avoid it is because if they do have a selfish bone in their body, you know that you're not going to be able to resist if they try to take advantage of you. That's why you can't have them in your life at all.
If I care about them enough, yeah.
Absolutely. Right? So what I'm noticing here is that you've developed an adaptive strategy of only forming relationships with people who are very independent, because if they're at all dependent, you're not going to be able to resist their dependency.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Or is it too
Yeah,
judgmental?
that is. No, that's fair, but I never get to that point.
Of course.
So
You're
yeah.
never going to let it get to that point, right? Because
No,
if it gets there, you're fucked.
Yeah. And that's why I think that I've also never been in a romantic relationship.
Do you want to be in a romantic relationship?
I do. But it's also just, I do have a great life, so it's not something that I have very good friends now, and it's going pretty well at this point. So it's not something that I think I've sought out that much.
Sure.
But something that I've started to seek out a little bit. Also because of the consequences of what if it's a girl and all of this
Okay.
stuff, right? So it has a few layers.
So it sounds like you're afraid that you're not going to be able to live your life.
Pretty much, yeah. I primed mostly my mom for I think since I was like in 7th grade, and I was like, I'm gonna study abroad for half a year, and you need to be okay with that.
And how did that go?
I mean, I've said it since I was 13, so that was, I was okay saying that, and that was, then COVID kind of hit, so it became 3.5, but I mean, it still happened.
It did happen, and how did your mom handle that?
I called home once a day. So
that was, I was in suspense there because you said I called home once, and then I was like, what? Once
yeah,
during...
once a day, and she, I mean, the thing is, she also really just, the thing she says and the thing she means, or the thing she is actually in her head, is two different things. So
Okay.
she does say things like, I really want you to live your life. You don't have to come home. But then if I'm not home for a week, then she will withdraw into herself and be like, oh my God, family's... she's not saying this, but I can see it in her head, you know? Or hear the thoughts. I do know how she thinks at this point, right?
We'll accept that you're telepathic. Totally fine. We keep going.
Yeah, so I think I lost my...
Well,
my
so
train of thought.
it sounds like when you do exert some degree of independence, that your mom will become quite withdrawn. You know what she's thinking. And then I'm guessing what happens is that you change your behavior to make your mom's thoughts change.
A little bit. Or
Yeah.
try to talk about it, but
How does that work?
sometimes that is good. I mean, the thing is, she is pretty emotionally intelligent as well, and
Of
she's
course.
very in tune with her emotions, or she picks up very well how other people are feeling, but her conclusions to why they're feeling the things that they're feeling are always wrong, or she has a little bit of a poor judgment on that. But yeah, so I have changed my behavior, and it's come to this point where we are a little bit of a standstill now, or we're not talking as much about how we are feeling, or her what's going on at the moment. And I do feel a little bit guilty about that, right? Because I have given her a lot of emotional support during the years, and now I know she doesn't have anyone to talk with. So that's also why it's so hard, you know?
Why doesn't
So
she have anyone to talk with?
she doesn't really have that many friends, or any, and she's kind of isolated. I mean, she goes to work, and she
Dude, Sophia,
cares a
you're
lot
trying
about the
so
family.
hard to be a good daughter. Dude, holy shit.
Yeah. I'm just trying to... If I can do something, then... Yeah, I do it.
So you know, when I see situations like this, like we're going to just talk generally for a second. So this is kind of a situation where sometimes children get parentified. Does that phrase mean anything to you?
Sure. Yeah.
Like, so who's responsible for the emotional needs of the people in the relationship? Like, you are, right? This is where, and we're speaking of parentified, having access to your parents' bank account as a child so that you can pay bills is like, how much more parentified can you get? And that's really challenging. I think there's a book that may be useful to you called, I forget what the exact title is, but Being the Child of Emotionally Immature Parents or something like that. So it's a really good book that sort of talks about this kind of stuff. And this stuff happens a lot. It also happens a lot in Middle Eastern cultures, Indian cultures, like South Asian cultures. I'm sure it happens all over the world. It's not cultural, but that there's sort of like what I'm kind of noticing here, and this happens a lot, where there's emotions that are hard to tolerate, like loneliness or guilt, and there are particular behaviors that you can engage in that will make those emotions better, like calling your mom. And so then you get stuck in this kind of cycle where we have one antidote to the problem of feeling negative emotion, which is to change our behavior, which makes sort of makes sense. But I'm seeing that you're doing this already. But I think part of like the path forward is going to be actually the tolerance of loneliness or guilt. And the other really dangerous thing here, and I don't know if you think your mom is capable of this, but as long as you are there as a safety valve, I don't know that she's ever going to make friends. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. And that's, yeah, of course it's a little bit hard in the sense that I also get validated in the way that I feel. Or for example, when I was studying abroad, like, so my two younger sisters, they were fighting all the time. And they were just, creating this environment in the home, and it's not my responsibility, but if I'd been there, it wouldn't have been as bad because I can mitigate people. So, and I have withdrawn my support or set up some boundaries, and I can actually see things getting worse. So, but yeah.
So
Either it gets worse and then it gets better, or it just gets worse.
Yep. And so I think a big question you've got to ask yourself, Sophia, is like, what are you responsible for? And I know that there's like sort of like a textbook answer, which is like, they're responsible. I'm not, like that's their lives if they want. But like as a family member who loves your family, you've really got to think about what amount of responsibility are you going to accept about this?
Yeah, and I have been thinking about that lately. And it gets more complicated with my youngest sister, who is autistic and has an anxiety disorder and
Oh my
all
goodness.
types of things. So I have thought about it. When she moves out, I can start living my life. That might be, but everything might break apart before that, because my oldest younger sister, she's kind of a wild card. So
how do you get support? Who takes care of you?
It's not one way with my sisters. It's a complicated relationship.
Okay.
So we give each other emotional support, like both ways, and my friends, of course.
Have you ever considered seeing a therapist or something like that?
I have. Yeah. But I know. I have this.
Yeah.
The thing that always comes up is I can fix everything, so I don't need to, right? But could probably be beneficial.
Yeah, so I do think, Sophia, you can fix everything because you've demonstrated to us that that's what you do. And I don't think you should need to. And while you can handle it yourself, like, why? Right? I think that's, I mean, very practically, you've probably been conditioned to think that way. And, you know, you mentioned earlier that you don't want to be dependent on someone else. So there can be a lot of concerns there in terms of therapy and like,
Yeah.
you know, it's a weird relationship. Like, are you going to owe them? Is it going to be hard for you? And the answer is like, yes. You're going to feel all those kinds of things. And then hopefully a good therapist will help you work through those feelings so that you can take care of that shit with the therapist, so that when you find a romantic relationship, you don't have to take it. That stuff is done. I don't know if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
But
it does make sense.
learning how to be, because you're not going to be dependent. I mean, hopefully, if they're a good therapist, you won't be dependent on them. That's not the point
Yeah,
of therapy.
I think that I would actually feel dependent on or get to the stage where I would feel dependent on my therapist. I think so that's a different conversation, but I also have a little bit of an ego sometimes. So I'm also
Sure.
sometimes feel like
Seems like it's a
could
little bit more than
people-
a little bit.
maybe a little bit.
Maybe a big
So-
one.
Yeah, maybe. But so could they actually help me? Would they understand or have the skills to help me, you know?
Do you think that people who are listening right now or I understand you?
Yeah. I do.
Why?
But, yeah.
Why do you think that?
Because I explained it well.
I would completely agree. I think you explained it very well.
Thank you.
I think that's so I understand your hesitation. Would they be able to understand? Well, if you keep on explaining stuff like you are today, I think it'll make it easy for them.
Yeah, and that's and then I kind of take it a step further and it's not the goal of them to understand it. It's the goal of them to help me understand some things, and if I already understand it, then what's the point, kinda. That's where my mind goes sometimes, at least.
Sure. And I think that's a completely valid thing to bring up with them. It's like, hey, if I understand everything already, like, what's the point of even having this conversation? Which kind of comes back to our conversation, which, can I share some thoughts with you?
Yeah.
So the first is, I understand why you're afraid, but I'm actually getting a lot of signals that you're moving in the right direction in a very thoughtful way. What do you think about that?
I think that, yeah, that resonates, yeah.
So, and this kind of comes back to the extremes. When I actually look at what you're doing, and maybe just to kind of recap. So you grew up in a situation where there were some, your favorite word of the day, complex family dynamics, right? So a lot of emotional, emotions were exchanged between people in different ways, so that you guys are actually pretty good at discussing things. It does sound like people don't keep things to themselves, but that there were a lot of like sort of unhealthy dynamics in the house. It sounds like you started accepting a lot of responsibility to make sure that things didn't fall apart quite young. And so now what's sort of happening is you're kind of wondering, like, okay, so sure, you can sort of live your life, right? But you can, like, your life is going to be over there and their life is going to be over here. But are you ever going to be able to, let's say, presume for a moment that you are bisexual and that you start to date, let alone marry and have children with a woman? Are you ever going to be able to visit your parents? Right? Or does your life need to be completely separate? It's almost like there's this life over there that's Sophia with her family, and then there's like this other human being that's starting to emerge from the cocoon. And what I'm kind of hearing is that what you really want is, like, wouldn't it be great if those were not two separate lives, that they could be together? In a practical sense, I get the sense that you're starting to bridge those two.
Yeah.
But that what you're really afraid of is that but that feels like it's a balancing act. It feels very like effortful to start to combine them. And what I'm really sort of noticing is that what you want kind of more than anything else is to like have that be easy instead of so hard. Because I'm hearing that you're actually doing it.
Yeah, and for me, if it was only like having a break from talking with my dad or something, if it was just on me, I wouldn't mind. I don't mind conflict at all, or I don't mind saying what I mean or what I feel like, or it's just a lot of some people are just a little bit vulnerable mentally, and I wanna, yeah,
Yeah, I'm hearing that you're really concerned about the fallout this could have with your family,
yeah,
especially if if you kind of get ostracized or you create conflict and you're not there to pick things up, like what's going to happen?
yeah, yeah.
Sounds scary. Also
Yeah,
sounds
it
like
is.
you're responsible for that.
Yeah,
What do you think about
yeah.
that?
Well, I would like to not be.
What if it
uh,
hurts other people if you aren't?
can you say that again?
What if it hurts other people if you aren't responsible anymore? What if things fall apart if you stop taking care of them?
Yeah, then I would have to deal with the feeling of being responsible for it. Because if I could have prevented it, I still feel like there's at least a decision, right? That I would have to be okay with.
Are you okay
Yeah.
with it?
Not now.
I think that's the right answer.
Yeah.
So I think it's the perfect answer because it's not now. And it signals to me. This is why I'm actually like not too worried about you, because if you had said yes, like that's a better answer than I could have envisioned. Because it signals to me that you are aware of where you are right now and that one day it could be different. And it's like
Yeah.
one step at a time. And it seems to me like you're actually really crushing it, Sophia, honestly.
I plan on making it different at least. I have to see how, yeah. I'm 24 right now, so I don't know. In a couple of years, maybe. And maybe in the next year, who knows. Yeah, there's some things to consider, and that's also why I feel like it's so difficult, because it's not just, you know, some things that I think about myself, or some emotions that I don't know where it's coming from or dealing with. Or I have that too. I have the whole gifted child kind of thing too. I have and undiagnosed ADHD, and I have all of that thing, all of those things, right? So yeah,
I have one last
but
thought. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, it's just I found a way to deal with things, right?
You did. I think you're very much a survivor. I have one last kind of thought, Sophia, which is that, you talk about this like a fear, like you're afraid that you're never going to be able to fully live your own life. But I almost wonder, that sounds a little bit more to me like a hope than a fear.
That is true. Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting, right? Because we frame it like a fear, even though it really sounds like a hope.
Yeah, I don't think that it will happen. So, I'm not really afraid I'm afraid of the fallout.
Sure.
I'm not afraid of not being able to live my life. I will at one point.
So, okay, that's interesting. That is yeah.
Yeah. Can
I'm
I
not
ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you think it would be a good idea for me to go into psychiatry in the field? Or should I stay away from trying to fix people's problems? Or it's not fixing people's problems, of course. You're a doctor, but
What would be your reasons for going into psychiatry?
I like understanding people and understanding where people are coming from, and I do get a sense of, I don't know if I would call it fulfillment, but from actually helping people and being able to leave it when you're done from work.
Yeah. So
That could be.
I think it's a great thing for you to consider. So here's what I'd say. The first is that I think that honestly, desiring to help people is, in my opinion, not the best reason to go into psychiatry. I think the best reason to go into psychiatry is because you like understanding how the mind works.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that is the primary.
yeah,
reason.
and you said that one first. So I think that's a really good reason. So I think you have to really like love the material almost in a theoretical way, because the truth of the matter is that you can help people in all kinds of ways. You can work at a soup kitchen, you can feed the homeless, you can do all kinds of stuff. So I think you really, if you love understanding the mind, and the mind is like really fascinating to you, I think psychiatry is fantastic. I think setting good boundaries is going to be really important for you. And I think something that you've got to watch out for is that when people have difficulty, when people are responsible for other human beings like you are, that's kind of like, that's not a advantage, that's a disadvantage. Right? So
Yeah.
a lot of the things that you get concerned about in terms of becoming dependent on other people, like, if you're not careful, people will become dependent on you. And navigating that and even like reacting to their dependence could be unhealthy for both people involved, because walking that tightrope can be tricky. It's not a reason to not go into it.
No, it makes sense. I'm still figuring out what I
Yeah,
plan to specialize in.
I think if you like the mind, then that's fantastic, and that's a great reason to do it. I do think that the work that you're going to have to do internally is somewhat different and should not necessarily be conflated with psychiatry. So I think it's like, that's the last thing. I mean, you can certainly learn a lot about yourself. And oftentimes, as part of psychiatric training, you go through your own therapy. But I would really say that, I wouldn't try to hit two birds with one stone but a lot of people do. And there's a lot of, evidence that wounded healers are a thing. So a lot of people who go into psychiatry are inspired by personal events and stuff like that. And that's totally fine. Like, it's legit. So I'd say if you love the mind, then absolutely. And you want to help people, go for it.
Okay. Yeah. I was just curious. Yeah, why? Yeah, I mean, I'm in med school, so I'm just considering what I want to do.
How far are you in med school?
So it's a little different in Denmark. So it's second year, but it's 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm familiar with that system.
Okay.
But it's your second year, but you haven't really dove into the medicine yet, right?
No, it's mostly just biology and
yeah. So I think the real answer to that question is going to be like so you're in year 2. When you start, by the end of year 5, I think hopefully you'll know, if I'm understanding things correctly, because it's like 2 years of like biology and stuff, and then 2 years you're going to learn like physiology. You haven't started anatomy lab and stuff, right?
It's a little different. It's
When do you start doing clinical rotations?
So year 4.
Okay. So that's really when, you'll know. So you can love the mind, because when I went into med school, like I thought I really loved physiology and stuff, which was great. But I mean, I still love physiology, but I ended up doing psychiatry because I just liked working with those people.
Yeah.
So I think it's fine.
Yeah.
If you're in med school, that's great.
Yeah, I've been not all over the place, but I have a bachelor's in physics as well. I like understanding stuff, right? So I'm just trying to figure out exactly what I want to do. Yeah.
Cool.
But
I'm very excited for your future.
thank you.
It's not going to be easy.
I am too.
But I think you'll get there, Sophia.
Hopefully. But probably,
Any other thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
No, I don't think I have any. Thank you so much.
You're
for
very welcome. I'm not
conversation.
sure if you this was productive for you in any way, but I enjoyed talking to you for a little while.
I think it was productive. I think just talking about it, like, I think about a lot of this stuff, but I don't say it out loud. So I think that's, yeah,
Okay.
beneficial.
Good luck to you, Sophia.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay. So. What to even say, chat? What to say at a time like this? First is, I think we're going to need to learn something about how to manage unhealthy family dynamics. So I don't know if I'm kind of thinking just out loud here, but there's so much literature out there about how to be a good parent and how to deal with problematic kids. But there's so little literature out there about how to be a good child and deal with problematic parents. And I think we're seeing it. Like, we see it a lot in this community. And this is the challenge, right? So Karislal is saying move out. And this is what I sort of dislike about the internet. So there's going to be all kinds of people out there who will say, like, oh, just like, your dad having whatever, I guess, conservative cultural or religious views, or maybe they're just personal and not cultural or religious, about faith and sexuality and stuff, like, oh, like, just screw them, right? And you go live your life and you be happy. And I think there's value to that kind of thing. But I think that people who say those kinds of things on the internet don't appreciate that these are your parents, this is your family. And that, sure, you can peace out, but then, like, what happens to everyone else who doesn't peace out? Right? It's kind of like this problem of, imagine you have a ship that has a bunch of holes in it and it's taking on water, and this ship is going down and you're bailing water, and everyone's like, you're bailing water, and like maybe you're bailing the most, and maybe people aren't bailing as much water as you are. And so then people are like, oh, save yourself. And then you jump off the ship and you save yourself because you can handle it. You can swim. But then what happens to the boat? If you abandon it, it's more likely to sink. And so this is a real conflict that a lot of people face. Like, sure, I can go live my life, but what happens to the people I leave behind? And I don't get any appreciation for that nuance. I've never seen that nuance on any kind of relationship advice, kind of situation. It's always no contact, low contact, like, just abandon it and go live your life, which is good advice. But I think sometimes we forget that we'll be leaving some people behind, and it could be making things worse, and that while I am involved, I can actually make a difference. I think the right path to walk is slow. I do think that there are ways that you can start to set limits and stuff. And we even heard from Sophia about how she was, started telling her mom, I'm going to study abroad. I'm going to study abroad. I'm going to study abroad. And then she went through with it and then made daily phone calls, right? Which is okay. And that's how you start to set boundaries and expand boundaries and stuff like that. So it sounds good. But I think it's not as easy to live your life as people make it out to be, especially when you've got family involved. And it's like, just go live your life. Like, it's really hard, and it can come at a big cost to not only your own emotional well-being, which then we'll sometimes see people like numbing themselves or becoming calloused, right? Where they're like, I'm going to live my life and other people can go themselves. I'm not responsible for their happiness, which is true. You're not. And there's a lot of impact that you can have in other people's lives, right? That's what we're kind of about here. We're here and we acknowledge that there's this AoE healing kind of thing, which presumes that you can have an impact in someone else's life. So I think it's challenging. I don't know exactly what we're going to do about this, but I'm noticing a greater and greater need about equipping our generation with, first of all, the awareness of what's going on in these parental dynamics. And secondly, like, how to support y'all in these conversations, in this journey, in a way that is not, minimizes the harm to the people that you love and care about. So if Sophia's, if she's questioning her religion and her faith in God and is exploring her sexuality, like all the more power to her. And also like she may love her family as despite what their views are, that's usually how family works. And there's probably like a lot of, it's going to be an uphill climb for her. I think she's doing really great. And I think for those of y'all that are maybe not for a little bit further, good for you. If you're not a little bit further, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned here about setting boundaries like well in advance and kind of living your life. And then also, but like not doing it like a Band-Aid, like, rip it right off. It's kind of, you can do it sort of slow and grow up and start to become independent. And part of that also means like having people learn to become independent. It can also be really challenging to watch because once you leave, things can get worse. And it's really hard to watch that. And I think a really common thing that I see is that there are certain behaviors that can fix emotions. And this is how you end up, honestly, in like codependent relationships, like romantic relationships, where loneliness hurts so much that I'll re-engage with someone, like potentially on a physical level, to make the loneliness go away for the both of us. And so it's really the intolerance of negative emotion. It's when we use a behavior to fix an emotion, which can sometimes be healthy, right? So if I'm not happy with the way that I look and I'm not happy about my health, there are behaviors that I can engage in that can make me feel better. But even then, if I start exercising, let's say, and eating healthier, I don't think it's necessarily the act of chewing the food that makes me feel healthy, right? It's the thought process that goes behind taking care of my body. And so you got to be really careful if you use actions to solve emotions. Because we see that all the time too in terms of, grand gestures of love and like love bombing and all this kind of stuff. These are people that use actions to substitute for thoughtfulness or other dimensions. I was really, really nasty to you. I was very toxic to you. I yelled at you or was even abusive. And now what I'm going to do is buy something very, very expensive to compensate for that. And so it's really challenging to be in these situations where we use actions or gestures as a substitute for the tolerance of emotion or really even processing that emotion. And that's when people really get into dependent kind of situations, right? Because that's the only thing you know how to do is like, oh, I feel guilty, so let me do something because I got to make the guilt go away. And then people end up getting stuck and dependent because the only way you know how to make the guilt go away is to engage in the behavior. Right? That also opens you up to things like emotional manipulation, because if someone can make you feel guilty, they can alter your behavior. We see that a ton with emotional manipulation, especially with parents towards kids. Because the parent knows, like, okay, if I start crying on the phone, you're going to come home for the holidays. So like that's the card I'm going to play because the child can't tolerate the negative emotion. So it's challenging. How do you become better at tolerating uncomfortable things? Practice. Right? I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but practice goes a long way. I think we're not going to have time for meditation today, but tomorrow, Wednesday, I'll teach y'all an emotion to help you tolerate negative emotions. Meditation to tolerate negative emotions. But today we got a raid. So any suggestions for raiding? The last thing is, in terms of a lot of this kind of stuff, I think especially when it comes, if y'all caught the caller who was talking about, wasting time, and the caller we were talking about ego and being a gifted kid and failure and living up to expectations. A lot of this ego related stuff is, I would strongly recommend y'all check out the ADHD guide, because there's a portion of the guide there that I think is really just an expansion on the meditation guide, but is the section on ego and ahamkara. And to really understand how, so as we're talking about in the guide to ADHD and doing stuff, we talk a lot about motivation. And what we don't realize is that big parts of motivation are actually emotions and ego. So even if we think about the people that we listen to today, There are cases of, I don't want to abandon my family. I want to be a dutiful daughter. And so that's like an identity that you adopt, which then absolutely shapes your actions. So if we think about motivation, what is motivation? It's the driving force towards action. And if you really want to conquer motivation and you want to really be in control of it, you have to understand what are the driving forces towards action. And the driving forces, two of the major driving forces towards action are emotions and ego. What I want to be. I don't want to be a failure. I want to be successful. I want people to be proud of me. I want to major in the thing that everyone is very impressed by when I say it. I'm not just a physicist, I'm a quantum physicist. I don't just build computers, I build quantum computers. And so what happens is as we give into that ego, it dictates a lot of our actions, and then we end up sometimes in these really terrible situations where you actually don't like what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You're not happy, but you're doing it so that you can impress other people. You're doing it to live up to the expectations of other people. And then what we experience that as, we toss this term around a lot. I don't even know if it means anything anymore. But we toss around this term burnout. I mean, it means something. Then people say, I'm burnt out. And then the question is like, okay, why are you burnt out? What's going on there? The question is like, okay, right? What does it mean that you're burnt out? And what people really mean is that they don't understand the things that drive them to action, right? So the things that make me choose my major and choose my job are actually my ego. And it's not stuff that I find fulfilling. And as I craft a life for myself that is based on the gratification of my ego and impressing others, of course I'm going to burn out. Of course I'm not going to have any energy left, because you never refill your tank because you don't actually enjoy what you do. And then people are like, I'm lazy, I'm undisciplined, I'm unmotivated. I struggle to like actually write this book that I want to write. You take whatever example you want. And so the more that we kind of go in that direction, we realize like, this is all motivation stuff. It all comes down to ego and emotion. And so if y'all are interested in that stuff, I highly recommend y'all check out the guide. Buzzing noise in the background. Yeah, maybe we need to alter the air conditioners on, but yeah, I saw there was by the way, I want to just say thank you to everyone who's answering questions in chat. So I think it's really cool to see like how much our community is leveling up. And I appreciate, I don't really look at chat when we're looking at stuff, but it was really great that y'all are like, I see actually a lot of really high level answers to questions. Like this person, like how I met your mundo, a lot. Vitamin D, B12, iron are some of the most common tests in the context of mental health. Like that's some good stuff. I don't know if I think we have a YouTube video about, 6 lab tests that gamers should get. But I think it's great how much everyone is learning. Oh my God, this is the start of our parasocial relationship. I guess so. I have a degree in nutraceuticals. Very interesting. Any thoughts about which ones actually work very well? Can you explain the use of therapy beyond understanding? Let me make a note of that. Maybe we'll do a whole video about how therapy works. Curcumin is an MAO inhibitor. Very interesting. I didn't know that. Active ingredient in turmeric. All right, who are we raiding? I guess we can raid. Looks like Pokemon is streaming Overwatch, so let's just raid Pokey today. Cool. All right, so we'll see y'all on Wednesday, and take care, everybody. Adios, friends.